welcome to another Beyond Denial lecture series. This is going to be part 2 of our Cities and Gnomes of Ancient Egypt lecture series. And I know the last one is a little long. There are so many different cities. There are so many different things that I wanted to talk about. So it was very, very hard to narrow down. I'll give a little brief recap of what we talked about last time, and then I'll tell you guys what we're going to talk about this time. And as I mentioned, unfortunately, I do have to cut out one of the parts that I was going to talk about in this time because I found too many cool things that I wanted to talk about with this one. But it makes sense topically of why we were going to cut it out. So last time for our May lecture, we talked about ancient Egyptian borders throughout time. We talked about gnomes, not gnomes with a G, but gnomes with an N. And we went through all of what those gnomes are, and then the capitals of those gnomes and the main deities in those gnomes as well. And then the big chunk of the lecture was going through the capital cities of Egypt at that time, depending on what time period we're talking about. And feel free, if you have more questions about these, I will answer them. My big thing is if I today do not mention a city that you think I should have mentioned, it's probably because I mentioned it in part 1, and so I'm trying to keep it consistent. And I'll either ignore the question, or I'll let you know that's in part 1. So even if something is both a capital city and a cult center, I talked about it in the capital cities section. I won't talk about it in the cult center section. So hopefully that just like precursor, try not to repeat. So like Memphis and Thebes, we are not going to talk about today because we talked about those when we talked about capital cities. That lecture is already on my YouTube, and this lecture will go up on YouTube shortly after. Sorry, I just realized I gotta do that. So today, our main section, we're going to talk about the cult centers of ancient Egyptian religion. And so these are some cities that had a sort of main focus of one particular god. And then we're gonna, another big chunk of this lecture, honestly, it's kind of half and half, is we're gonna talk about Egyptian occupation and Egyptian cities outside of the Nile River Valley. So we're gonna include oases, we're gonna look at the Sinai Peninsula, we're gonna look at cities on the Red Sea, Egyptian cities that they founded in Nubia, and then as well as Egyptian cities founded in the Levant. And unfortunately, I did mention that I was going to talk about necropoli or cemeteries of ancient Egypt, but to be honest, I ran out of time and it would make this lecture too long. And so even though these necropoli are super important, and they do obviously give us a lot of great insights into the ancient Egyptians, they aren't technically cities for the most part, and they are often kind of far away from the cities. So I felt it was okay that I was going to push this part off of the lecture. I definitely am considering doing a lecture about this. The main reason I wanted to tell you guys these, the necropoli, and I really wanted to go over, like, what are the Arabic names for them? Because you will see it in Egypt news that they are going to call it by their Arabic name. They sometimes will mention an ancient Egyptian name or the necropoli near this city, but they will be calling it Abu Ruwash. They will be calling it Tel El Farama. Like, you're not going to know what those things are. But they're not also cities. And so I am possibly going to do this as a lecture. I could do this as a discussion, but I think I would rather do it as a lecture where I can actually go in deeper and I can pick some that, are more, specific, but I don't know if it's going to fit in this year's lecture schedule because we only have 3 lectures left in this season. I'm really excited about all the ones that I'm planning for this season, but I am considering that maybe I will present those 3 options, and we'll present those 3 options and you guys can vote. If you guys would like a Necropoli of Ancient Egypt series lecture this season, we could do that. If you want that, it might have to wait till next year. We'll see. Sorry, I didn't want to answer any questions until I finished that intro. So, hello, friend at arms, welcome on in. And the window of appearances is the funniest thing ever. And I feel like I need to incorporate that somehow because I love calling the chat box the window of appearances. I have to write that down because that was so funny. I will redefine gnome right now. So an ancient Egyptian gnome, or nomos, it comes from I think Greek and such, and it essentially is a territorial division. It is a state, it is a county, like whatever you want to call it. It is a territorial division within ancient Egypt, and those are all under the pharaoh, and they were ruled by a nomarch who then would go and go report to the pharaoh. You already had your turn, Memphis. That is the funniest joke. Necropoli. I love that so much. So Philae is added, Karnak is not, because Karnak is Thebes. So Karnak is included, we talk about it. Yes, it is a cult center, but Karnak is not a city. Karnak is the temple within Thebes, or Waset. Yes, so I don't know, I like all the ideas that I have for this year. So I will consider to put it to a vote on the Discord of what you guys want this year. Because I'm still, the topics that I have, I really like, and I'm definitely going to do them. They've just sometimes been put off by other things. So, what are they on the top of my head? It is coffin types throughout ancient Egyptian history. I've pushed that off for years now. I've been wanting to do that for a long, long time. Sea peoples is on the list, on the chopping block. And then the one that I don't think I will let you guys get rid of, because I've talked about it already too much, is doing my American misuse of ancient Egyptian motifs and stories. So yeah, it's y'all's decision, but I like all three of those really well, and like Necropoli is definitely going to get added to next year. It's just if you guys want it now rather than later. Because I know you guys have been waiting for the Sea People one. I've been waiting for the Sea People one. But yeah, I already have the ideas in my brain. So I might put it on Discord so you guys can fight it out. But yeah, so I had to postpone that, but we'll get to it at one point. I think it's going to be too long if I combined it, to be honest. Because I already actually wrote the outline for the coffins, because the coffins lecture was supposed to be this month's lecture. So everything I've already ousted one of the lecture topics and pushed it because I made this part 2. So coffins I've already started in a way. And then I now have the notes that I originally had for this one for Necropoli. I only cut it out like earlier this week. So, I know, it's complicated. Yeah, so, but yeah, let's get started with our cult centers of ancient Egypt. So these are just the large ones. They are obviously not for every single god. Some of these are definitely full ancient Egyptian cities. Some of these cities are really the only things that really remain there are just these cult centers. And the temples for the gods. And so sometimes we are not able to get a lot of good information about the city itself outside of this temple. But we're trying our best. But we're going to talk about these cult center cities. I have not put these in any sort of order whatsoever. So take that as you will. There's no order of any of these. And I know that I've probably missed some of these things. I'll admit I went off of the Wikipedia for ancient Egyptian cities, and they Amarna's not included because Amarna was a capital, sadly. But yes, Amarna is technically a cult center, but Amarna was also a capital, so Amarna's not included in this lecture. But yeah, I know. There are a lot of capital cities that are also cult centers. No, it's okay. Plenty. It's weird that I'm not going to talk about Thebes and talk about the cult of Amun in it. But I had to divide this somehow. Hey Jay. How are the cities represented in Assassin's Creed Origins? I think I always like to say Assassin's Creed Origins is like 65 to 75% accurate. They do include some cities that are kind of rare, kind of not talked about a lot. There's actually one that we're going to talk about on the Red Sea that is like unexpectedly, like I can't even find like a modern reconstruction of the city, but it's unexpectedly in Assassin's Creed Origins. And the thing about Memphis that annoyed me in the game is that it's not on the east bank of the Nile. It's on the west bank of the Nile. Like there's a pretty significant canal in between Memphis and like the pyramids of like of Dashur and Saqqara, but like it's mainly that it's my more annoyance of the map of Assassin's Creed Origins that they put everything on the west bank of the Nile, even though there were a lot of things on the east bank. Most of the modern cities are on the east bank of the Nile rather than the west bank. West bank is the land of the dead, east bank is the land of the living. So the first one we're going to talk about is Heliopolis. So this is one of the oldest sites in ancient Egypt. It dates all the way back to the pre-dynastic period, but it was really important to the Egyptians during the Old and Middle Kingdoms. And it's currently located in northeast Cairo. The area is called Ma'at Turia or Ain Sams, are two of the names of like the neighborhoods that it's under. Yeah, Jay, it's not a hard and fast rule when it comes to people living on the East Bank or the West Bank. There are like Malkata is an ancient Egyptian palace that's on the West Bank, and Deir al-Medina that's on the West Bank. But you could make most assumptions that most cities are focused on the East and most necropoli, cemeteries, pyramids are focused on the West. The concept of the West, like beyond the actual just western shore of the Nile, that is the land of the dead, Deshret, the land of the West. So they have a goddess of the West who is protecting the afterlife. Like they believe the afterlife is in the West. So no matter what, the deep West, going into the desert and stuff, is the land of the dead. So you'll notice this is what I'm going to do for all of these is I'm attempting to say the Egyptian name, the Greek name, and then any of the main deities. Obviously, when we're talking about cult centers, when we talk about the later cities, we won't talk mainly about the main deities, but I really try to get you guys the Egyptian names and the Greek names for these cities because you might recognize one over the other. No problem, Remy. We honestly just got started. All I've been doing right now is a recap of stuff and why I'm not going to unfortunately include necropoli. No, so it's not actually called the land of the dead. It has a specific name. It's the afterlife. The land of the dead is just a Deshret means what does Deshret mean? Deshret means chaos, I think. Can't remember. I can't remember off the top of my head. It doesn't actually mean land of the dead. It keeps beeping necropoli. I'm sorry. I have to put that on my list of stuff. But yeah, it is definitely uninhabitable desert for sure. They definitely know that the desert is a harsh place to live their lives. So for Heliopolis, the Egyptian name is Iunu, and it means the pillars. It could be referring to the obelisks, but it also could just be pillars. It is also called the Per Ra, or the House of Ra in the pyramid texts. And then the Greek's name is Heliopolis, or the City of the Sun, as they associated Ra and Atum with their god Helios. So obviously, because it is the Per Ra, this is the main cult center for Ra, or any solar deity. So it does also include Atum. It does also include Khepri. It includes Re Herakti. It includes Horus. Even some Sekhmet, like even some of these solar deities, could have it. Yes, Remy. So it definitely was. It's still in northern Cairo. So like now Cairo is on top of it, but when the original area of Cairo was built, it was still sort of in the outskirts of the city. There's some really cool old maps where you can see where Heliopolis is mapped on where it actually is located. So yeah, so it's the focus of the worship on the sun. it can include a lot of different gods. Obviously, Ra is the big one, but it's any solar deity, really. So the primary temple in this city was known as the Per At, or the Great House, or it is also called the Per Itmu, or the House of Atum. So Atum is also a solar deity. He's a creator deity, and so he is also included all in this. The priests who worshipped here believed that Atum or Ra were the first beings in the world, creating themselves out of the primordial waters. And Ra actually sort of has a decline around the 5th dynasty, which actually then leads the Aeneid, or a group of 9 deities, actually being worshipped more than Ra and Atum. But this city is still a hot cult center for Ra throughout it. It's just not always the hot. Ra's not always the hot topic sometimes. Until then you get a river in Egypt. Hi, Cherry Red. Welcome on in. Until you get Amun Ra. So Amun Ra, like, they combine it together. Ra does get a little bit more importance, but it's technically more about Amun than it is about Ra. So Jay, that Ptolemy, probably not, because he was like a little kid, sort of. But the Ptolemies in general, I don't know. I don't know if they are at that much. I didn't like even how they depicted Cleopatra in the game. They obviously they are the villains in the game, so they're going to have to be a little horrible. No, Atum is the hidden one, I think. Right? I think Atum is the hidden one, not Amun. I get them mixed up sometimes. I think Atum is the hidden one. Because he's the... I thought he's the... I thought he was, invisibility. Or maybe that is Amun. I can't remember. It's whoever is part of the Ogdoad. But that is Amun, isn't it? That's Amun and Amunet. Oh god, sorry. I'm so bad at remembering gods off the top of my head. I think that might be. I think it actually might be Amun. I can't remember. So what is standing in Heliopolis today? It was still around in the Greek and Ptolemaic periods of Egypt, but the Ptolemies were not really interested in Ra. They were not really into sun deities a lot. Obviously they had Helios, but like it was not one of their big main gods that they kind of worshipped. So the city was kind of abandoned, was not really super important. The Greeks and Romans started taking all the obelisks. Not every obelisk, but almost every obelisk that is in existence used to be here at Heliopolis, and then got transferred a lot. Got moved in lots of different places. So very, very, very little of the city or temple remains. Much of it is underneath the suburbs of Cairo called Al-Ma'atria, Ain Shams, or Tel Hissen. Sometimes you can see some stuff that pops up in fields. There are really random finds. I'm pretty sure it was in Origins. I'm not 100% sure, but I wouldn't doubt it was in Origins. Anything that they're doing development in the area, they tend to find things. They actually just found an almost complete funeral assemblage for a tomb. With some really cool scarabs and cosmetic items and stuff. They just found that in and around Heliopolis. Today, the only part that's really preserved at all is their open air museum, in which one obelisk still stands. You can see that in the center. And it still stands essentially in the same spot that it was originally standing at. But many of the obelisks that used to be at the site are no longer there. They are in other parts of Egypt, or are in other parts of the world, really. Cleopatra's Needles probably came here. They're not made by Cleopatra. They were just taken by Cleopatra, moved to Alexandria, and now moved to other places. So yeah, that is Heliopolis. Then we have Abydos. So this is also a very, very, very old site. It is located north of Thebes in Upper Egypt. Its Egyptian name is Abidu, and its Greek name is Abydos. Technically, this is a name borrowed by the Greeks from a completely unrelated city of Abydos in Turkey. So it's not, I don't believe it's actually based on the Egyptian name of it. Or maybe it is, and they just were like, oh, well, it sounds like Abydos, that place in Turkey, so why don't we call it Abydos? So Abydos has so much going on that you can do a whole lecture about it, because it is such an old city. So there are this is the main, again, like, this is something I would include also in my necropoli lecture, because this is the main burial place of pre-dynastic kings. So Mernit, Den, Horden, like all of these pharaohs are all buried in this area. And when you then get, when we're looking at it as the main cult center, though, around the 5th dynasty, the first god that's venerated here is something called the Kenti Amentiu, who isn't a really like big god. His literal name means the foremost of the Westerners, and you guys may have heard that phrase because it's a really common epithet of Osiris and sometimes Anubis as well. And so Kenti Amentiu is this manifestation of the dead pharaoh in the afterlife. So then when you get into the first intermediate period, Kenti Amentiu essentially just becomes to be seen as an aspect of the god Osiris. And then they eventually emerge, and foremost of the Westerners becomes this epithet of his. And so Osiris and Isis are sort of the main gods that are worshipped here. And we later say that this is where the burial of Osiris is. And so we get things like the Osirion, which is situated behind this temple, which is a temple from Seti I and Ramses II. And over the years, about 9 to 10 different temples were built on one site in Abydos, between like the 1st and the 26th dynasties. Like they just keep on building on top of it and top of it. Yes, Hot Cherry Red. Technically, I think it's not necessarily named after the other Thebes. What did we say last time? One of them was called the Thebes of something gates, and I think it's the one in Egypt is called the Thebes of 100 gates, while the Thebes in Greece is the Thebes of 50 gates or something. But yes, it's very much a similar reason. We don't 100% know Addicted, but yeah, it's definitely, that would make a lot of sense. So it also is typically near their capital. So pre-dynastic pharaohs don't have necessarily a huge capital city, but we know most of the big pre-dynastic pharaohs are in the south, are in Upper Egypt. And then when you think of where the Old Kingdom pharaohs are, they're in Memphis, and Giza and Saqqara and Dashur, they are all next to Memphis. And then Thebes, they are all in the Valley of the Kings across the river. So most of it is that. There are exceptions to the fact. There are some people that just not very many, but there are some exceptions to they decided, no, they don't want to be buried there. They're going to bury themselves somewhere else. But most of the time they are buried near the capital city, that they are ruling in at that moment. So in Abydos today, there are a lot of really well preserved sites. Not very many accessible to the public, to my knowledge. Like this temple is accessible to the public, and you can go around and you can look at the Osirion. You can't go in it because it's flooded, but you can look at it. I don't know how many of the like pre-dynastic sites or any of these other temples that are kind of over to the sides, like I don't know how many of those are accessible to the public, but a lot of them are still very well preserved. So this one, again, was originally built by Seti I, and then Ramses II added on in the back. And then the Osirion is located behind the temple. It's built to resemble an 18th dynasty tomb for Osiris. It is a pretty big temple. It's not tall, so it's not as tall, but it is very wide and long. And then Ramses II builds out on top of it, so it's got a lot of little kind of winding passages. We can look at some photos of these later because I've been to this one as well. And then behind the city, we have the necropolis of El Kab, which is where the city, again, as I mentioned, the kings of the pre-dynastic and early dynastic periods are buried in El Kab. And there's other things like there's more tombs in Middle Egypt. There's tombs of the New Kingdom. I think this is tombs of the Ancient Empire. I think this is an old map by Mariette. So I think this tombs of the Ancient Empire refers to El Kab. Yeah, so Elephantine, we're jumping way down deep into the bottom half of ancient Egypt, into the Nile, very bottom of what is modern Egypt. So Elephantine is an island on the Nile in the very, very south, technically now part of the city of Aswan. Its ancient Egyptian name was Abu, which means elephant. And we think that maybe it got its name because the shape of the island is sort of like a tusk. It's not really like a tusk, but it's long. It's a long island. I don't know. But its Greek name is Elephantine, obviously meaning the same thing, meaning elephant. And this was one of the main cult centers for the god Khnum, so our ram-headed creator god, as well as his wife Satet, who is a personification of the Nile flood. There's also a triad, so we've mentioned this before, that like the Theban triad is Amun, Mut, and Khonsu, and so some of these cities have a triad of gods. Typically it's like a husband, wife, child situation. Interestingly, the triad of Elephantine includes the goddess Anuket. She is a war goddess and a goddess of the cataracts of the Nile. And she is sometimes seen as the daughter of Khnum and Satet, but then other times is seen as the sister of Satet. So it's not always as... So I think for that map, the Tomb of the Ancients is pre-dynastic and the Tomb of is the Middle Kingdom. So those are separate time periods. Remy, there are few statues of elephants because elephants are not native to ancient Egypt. Elephants are something that probably very, very little ancient Egyptians ever saw. I honestly don't even know too many depictions of them in tombs. I can think of one. I can think of one image of an elephant on the top of my head. Obviously we have the hieroglyph for elephant. They knew what elephants were. But no, they do not really do deserts. So we know that like back in the pre-dynastic period, ancient Egypt was more of a savanna-like aspect. And so we know during the pre-dynastic period, lions, giraffes, elephants, other creatures were probably more active in the Nile River Valley, but very quickly at the beginning of the early dynastic period into the Old Kingdom, Egypt became more dry. And so a lot of those animals fled to the south and did not. And so for the majority of the ancient Egyptian history, they are not actively living in Egypt unless somebody brings them there. And that includes lions, giraffes, honestly, I think even leopards, I don't even think are really active in that. They could have had some bones of elephants possibly being through trades and stuff. No, they used cattle. No horses, no camels. Horses come later. Horses come in the New Kingdom, or beginning of the New Kingdom. I don't believe Alexander brought elephants there because Alexander didn't go any further south than Egypt. He didn't go to southern Africa. And obviously he went to, he got close-ish to India, but he didn't come, when he went out, so he came down the Levant, came to Egypt, and then went out to India and died there. So himself did not bring any. Did some people later bring them? Maybe. They also did have donkeys. Yes, they loved ivory. They used a lot of ivory, but ivory also comes from hippos. Hippo tusks are ivory as well. So a lot of the times they could have used hippo ivory rather than elephant ivory. Carthage to the west, but Carthage is mainly a Roman settlement, so it is a later time period as well. But yes, they used hippo ivory. Ivory was used in a lot of different ways, in a lot of decoration, a lot of inlays. They also have these things called, the only way we call it is magic wands. They're not actually wands, but they are a piece of a curved tusk that's been flattened, and then it has carvings, and they're used in ritualistic, a lot of things are potentially for midwifery, birthing, protection. I don't think ivory would be used in weapons. Ivory is unfortunately very weak. It probably was used in ceremonial weaponry as an inlay, but probably not in an actively used weapon. Yeah, so the first Ptolemy may have had elephants because you were getting more power at that time, but during the main pharaonic period, there were no elephants in. Yeah, possibly instruments. Yeah, ivory is used a lot of different ways. I think we're gonna get an ad in a second. Yep, there we go. I will pause for a moment, but feel free to ask more questions. I'm gonna take some water. But yeah, if Ptolemy had elephants, I have no idea if those would be Indian or African elephants. So I don't hate the mummy movies. I just don't particularly like them, but that is also because I did not grow up with them. I have no nostalgia to carry me through inaccuracies, as I say. I've seen them, but I don't have the same nostalgia as I do for Indiana Jones, because I watched those when I was a kid and really loved them. I didn't watch The Mummy until after I had already started studying ancient Egypt. Yeah, so I don't hate them, but I don't love them. It's not a comfort movie for me. Yes, Remy, they definitely had like more exotic animals. There is some depictions of a Syrian bear. Very rare depictions of Syrian bear, but like a giraffe would be considered exotic for them because they aren't local. And even lions in some cases are considered exotic to them. But yeah, there's absolutely, they don't have deer, I don't think. But yeah, Syrian bear is one of the weirder ones that you've seen. And I thought of one for a split second. Technically an elephant. An elephant would probably be pretty exotic to them. No mooses. No moose. I'll answer that question, Addicted, when the ad break is over. So yeah, so the main little, like, besides deer, they'd have antelope, oryxes, or gazelle. Those are kind of the three. I am very bad at telling the difference between the two, or between the three. I don't know which ones they have. I'm pretty sure it's antelope and oryx, but I feel like they could also have gazelle, but I know there's a difference between the horns, but I don't know the difference. I don't think so. Nothing. So these temples would all have like major complexes. So they usually, a lot of these temples would have full enclosure walls and would have gardens and would have sacred lakes, and some areas would be accessible to a wide public and many would not be. Many would be like, quote unquote, the holy of holies and such. And so these temples would all be, it's unclear always like how many people would be able to go into what parts of it. There's even some indication that maybe not everyone would be allowed in the temple walls, because we've seen a lot of ritual items sometimes are found buried along the outside edges of the walls, indicating that not everyone would have been allowed to be inside. I think the only depiction of the Syrian bear that I know about is from the tomb of Rekhmire. So a lot of these are coming from larger offering scenes, and so it's showing people going away and then coming back and bringing things to the pharaoh. And so the Syrian bear, there's a Syrian bear, there's a giraffe with a monkey on its neck, and I think an elephant is all in one little scene in the tomb of Rekhmire in Luxor. Yeah, who knows? Maybe that is. Maybe they were closed. Maybe they're dropping it off. But yeah, it's some of these temples, like a lot of these temples have like a tier system, and so they have some sort of holy of holies that's only meant for the high priest, and others would just have smaller sections. But these also are places, a lot of temples had hospitals of some sort. I have to do more research on that with my medicine series, but it seems like it was a pretty common thing, at the least in the Ptolemaic period, but probably earlier, that they were having hospitals and things like that, mummification houses, and would be associated with these temples as well. And they also would probably have some sort of administrative station, because temples would own a lot of land, and they were having to take a lot of records of donations and things coming and going in temples, which is why these priests needed a lot of organization, had a lot of what do they call it? It's always that weird word for, it's a weird word for storage, but it's used in this context a lot, and I hate it because it's like a military word. I'm never gonna remember it. Can't remember at the moment. No, at the very highest, ancient Egyptian literacy for the entire nation is like 5%. So most of the time, no, it's not secured. It's not barracks. It's oh my god, it's something so close to barracks. It's like a military word for storage. No, it's a thing, not an armory. It's closer to an armory. Magazine, that's what it is. Thank you, Baha. It's they call them magazines sometimes. Magazine, they're these narrow hallways, and they'll be labeled as magazines on temple maps. When archaeologists have drawn them, they'll call them magazines, and they're these long, narrow hallways. I'm pretty sure it's magazines was the word. Yes, Jay, I have my master's degree in Egyptian art and archaeology, which is why I do what I do. Okay, so for Elephantine, what remains now? Unfortunately, not that much. So Elephantine doesn't have the best ruins in comparison to the other islands around Aswan. There is a small ruins of some shrines and some temples to different nomarchs and officials. There are 2 Nilometers on the island, which help measure the Nile's flood level during a flood. And that's something that the priest would watch out for, to make sure that they're going to have enough food and stuff like that. And it also makes sense, especially on this island, because of the connection with the goddess Satet, who is the personification of the Nile flood. And then today, the Aswan Museum is located on the southern part of this island. Now we have Philae, which I will admit I almost forgot to include, but I remembered it yesterday, so don't worry. So this is also very close to Elephantine, around Aswan. Technically, it historically was a combination of two different islands, but now most of the historic remains have been moved to a new island. So the Egyptian name is Pa-Ia-Rekek, and the Greek name is Philae, and I've always had trouble pronouncing it. Do not take my pronunciation as accurate. That is what it's in my brain, and I can't change it. I think in Greek it is like an actual F, not a PH. I think it's Philae. I think you say Philae, but nobody's not understood me when I've said Philae, so I'm sticking with Philae. Thank you for the libation. It does, though, appear in Coptic. It may have more of a P sound, like Pilak. Pilak is, I think, what it is in Coptic, but I don't know how to speak Coptic, so I don't know. I'm just going off of the phonetic that was on Wikipedia. I've also heard Philae, yes. So yeah, I have no idea. Pili, Philae, there's so many words, and I honestly hate this word because I just don't know what the accuracy is, and I haven't heard Philae. I haven't heard that one, I will say. Yeah, I have the hardest time with the AE and then with the PH, because I don't know if the PH needs to be more P or more F. So don't take my pronunciation to heart. Most of the time I've never had someone correct me. So this is a cult center for the worship of the goddess Isis, which is why this site is used, Philae. Oh yes, I have heard Philae. Yes. I have heard that. Philae. Yeah. It's just too many options. I think I have Jay. I think I've seen videos of people speaking Coptic. Very true, Hot Cherry Red. Yes. And so we are, for the most part, we're talking ancient Greek. But it's a difficult thing to kind of pin down. So this is a cult center for the worship of Isis, which is why this site arguably is more important in the Greek and Roman period than it is actually during ancient Egyptian times. It's still an old site, but it is more like the things that are preserved here are dating more towards the Greek and Roman period. And they loved Isis. If you guys didn't know, the goddess Isis is worshipped more in the Greco-Roman period than in almost the entirety of the Pharaonic Egypt. And I would even say she's worshipped more in just the Roman period more than all the other periods of ancient Egyptian history. So there does seem to be a pretty early shrine built by Pharaoh Taharka dedicated to Amun, but that's the 26th dynasty. That is not early in any sense of the word. They identified with her a lot. They did change her a lot, though. She becomes the goddess of the ocean in some cases. So she's very, very different. Very, very different. I'm gonna sneeze. Turning. I'm so sorry. Thank you. We can watch that later. I want to make sure we get through everything. Thank you. Oh, sneezing so much. It's 1 minute. Okay. Oh, it's this guy. Why is it breaking my computer? Otto, you broke my computer. Actually broke my computer.
Philae or Philae. Philae or Philae, Egypt.
It said two different ways.
Philae or Philae, Egypt. Philae.
It literally says two different things, but okay. That's fine. Two different options for you guys. I was gonna say, why are we getting hypnotized? I think the consensus is that I feel like it's just almost everything is accepted. And I'm sure when I'm sure when you talk to Egyptians today, I'm sure they're saying it completely differently as well. Little gay ghost, thank you so much for the follow. Oh, I was going to wear my rainbow. I forgot. I was gonna wear my rainbow. Something. Happy Pride Month, guys. I'm so sorry the sound alert didn't work. I don't know what's going on. There was an update, so maybe that's what. But yeah, tomato, potato, not potato, tomato, potato. But I've lost my notes. That's not my notes. Close that window. There we go. All right. Filet. Yeah. With a F. Yeah. So again, it's like, maybe that's where I got my pronunciation of it. But no, I'm sure like in Arabic, they are saying it completely differently as well. So many different exceptions of how this word is said. If anything, you just say the Egyptian name and confuse everybody. So again, we seem to have like an older shrine of Taharqa, but the first temple to Isis was a small kiosk that was built by Psamtik II during the 26th dynasty, and the oldest part of the large temple of Isis, so you can kind of see how it's all sort of kind of connected, this main large temple. The oldest part of that temple was built during the reign of Nectanebo I around 380 to 362 BCE. The vestibule of that temple is now integrated into the pylon, which you can see here, of the current temple. So it's just been added onto. It's very similar to Karnak in that sense, because it's just been added onto and added onto and added onto. The rest of the temples are mostly built by Pharaonic or Ptolemaic pharaohs, as well as added onto by Roman emperors. So although this is the main temple for Isis, there's also lots of worship of Hathor, there's lots of worship of Osiris, there's also lots of worship of Horus, all very similarly and related to Isis. And this site becomes very much a pilgrimage site for the Egyptians, as well as Greeks and Cretans and Anatolians. During the Greek and Roman periods, Philae overtook Elephantine as the most important temple in southern Egypt for people to travel to. So unfortunately, when the Aswan Low Dam was built in 1902, this site flooded every year, which you can see a picture, a postcard of it in 1906. You can see this is the temple over here in the back, and some other, probably a Nubian village on this side as well. And then after they raised the dam twice, once from 1907 to 1912, and then once from 1929 to 1934, the site was like permanently flooded, and just flooded essentially by this lake that is forming behind the Aswan Low Dam. And then in the 1960s, UNESCO starts the international campaign to save the monuments of Nubia, which includes excavating, documenting, and or moving various ancient monuments out of the way of the massive lake, now called Lake Nasser, that would form behind the Aswan High Dam. So Philae is a part of that rescue project. They originally planned to actually build 3 small dams to sort of create another lake to protect the islands, but on top of the cost of the Aswan High Dam and all the other projects they were doing, like moving Abu Simbel and documenting a ton of other sites and moving Temple of Dender and all these different things, it was just too much to make these 3 separate dams. So what they ended up doing is planned to relocate it on something called Angelika Island, which the only picture of Angelika Island is the one with this here. I think this is still the original island. Yeah, it is, because of the north. This is still the original island. And so this island is already at a higher elevation, was not at risk at flooding. They did end up raising the island and tried to mimic what, like, the elevations of Philae Island on Angelika Island. So like all of these little kind of bumps and stuff they tried to replicate on Angelika Island before moving the entire complex over to it. It took them only 2 years, which I think is honestly pretty impressive. for how much stuff is on here. So this complex is visitable. You can go and visit it. You take a little boat to get over to it. And the complex, I just mentioned a few things. It includes the main temple of Isis, a temple to Hathor, a temple to Horus, a temple to Augustus, a temple to Imhotep, the gate of Ptolemy II, the kiosk of Trajan, and much, much more. But now it is on a completely different island that looks very similar. All right, so just north of Aswan on the Nile is going to be the city of Kom and this is a city, it's called Nubet, meaning city of gold, which I did not know that it was called that originally. And its Greek name is technically Ombos. Kom is its Arabic name. This is one of the main cult centers for the worship of the god Sobek, the crocodile god. Sobek's actually got a pretty large amount of cult centers, which we'll talk about another one fairly soon. And the first temple in this area was built in the New Kingdom, but larger parts of the temple that are still preserved date to the Ptolemaic period. And the temple that is there is still largely intact, has some really amazing depictions of Ptolemaic pharaohs along with the god Sobek. There's also a rare depiction of medical instruments for surgeries on this temple. And again, that's mainly because temples were used as hospitals and somewhere where people could practice medicine. And of course, there has been a lot of crocodile mummies found in this site, but they are actually not located in Kom. They've been moved to a brand new museum called the Crocodile Museum in Aswan, which I've been dying to go to. Yes, there is a lot of people there's a group who's been collecting graffiti on Philae and stuff. And has the graffito of, what's his name? Askmet Akmon, I think is the priest's name. The last known ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. I forgot to include that with Philae. These boats? These are modern boats. These are modern ships. Yeah, these are not ancient ships. These are modern ships. Sorry, I don't get the question. Ancient Egyptian boats were not painted typically. They were just wood. The Crocodile Museum is definitely dope. And hi, Dr. Harm, welcome on in. Yeah, Egyptians had papyrus boats or wooden boats. It kind of just depends on the time. Okay, I can't tell if you're if you're joking. I'm going to take it seriously. It's very hard to tell when I'm joking. When there's joking in the in chat. Apologies. Did the boats have eyes? Sometimes they're depicted on the oar. Sometimes, not all the time, but yeah, sometimes they get depicted with that. All right, next city, we have Hierakonpolis. So this is a very, very, very old city. And this is located just south of Luxor. The ancient Egyptian name is Nekhen, and its Greek name is Hierakonpolis, meaning the city of hawks or the city of falcons. This is an original cult center for the god Horus, dating all the way back to the pre-dynastic and early dynastic age. It was probably seen as a religious capital of that time period. I know we didn't really talk about any, we don't really have an agreed upon capital city during the pre-dynastic period and the early dynastic period. Hierakonpolis was like a religious capital. Like it was probably one of the most important cities during that pre-dynastic period. And like I didn't include it in the capital cities because it's not like the same thing as a confirmed capital city. And this is also the cult center of a specific type of Horus. So this is Horus of Nekhen. And the mummy of Horus is supposedly buried in the city. That is why he gets very much associated with this. There are very little standing structures that are still here in Hierakonpolis, but there has been tons and tons of excavations, and they have found some of the most famous pre-dynastic artifacts you guys will ever like recognize. Great question, Dr. Harm. I'm just talking about that. So, arguably the most famous pre-dynastic artifacts have been found in the city. The Narmer palette, the scorpion mace head, the two dog palette, the Narmer mace head, the dog mace head. Like, there are arguably the most famous pre-dynastic artifacts that you have ever heard of, and maybe you haven't heard of, have been found here. A lot of them were found cached together, which is why they're also very famous. There was essentially a large cache in this city underneath one of the temples, which is where a lot of these objects were found. It is also the home to the oldest remains of a painted tomb wall, which you can see here in the bottom. This is called Hierakonpolis Tomb 100. It has depictions of boats. It has depictions of a smiting scene. It has depictions of the Master of Animals motif. It has depictions of hunting scenes. It has depictions of dogs. It has depictions of everything. It is an amazing, amazing feat for this tomb. Yes, but I have to find it. Yes, absolutely. Also, this image, I just pulled this because I thought it was an archaeological image. What I'm actually looking at is burials, and I think there's a burial of some elephants here. I think these are elephants, which makes again sense because I said that elephants were more common in the pre-dynastic period. Let me pull it up. Nope, go back. Like, we could do an entire discussion about this tomb. It's like impossible to kind of see bigger, but no, my Google, something is wrong with my Google. It's very hard to get a good picture. Also, this is not like a actual picture of it because it is in... No, it's okay. It's just hard to... So this is what the tomb looks like. This is the wall. These are the painted walls that were found. This is what it really looks like now. But it's just hard to pull up a full photo of it. So you have lions, a guy with a mace head. You have these boats with one very different shaped boat. So definitely something is more important, different type of boat. This is at the bottom corner is the smiting motif. He's holding three different people in the smiting motif. This is the Master of Animals motif, which is very common in Near Eastern iconography, but then gets taken essentially by like Egyptians. And no, it's on the Nile. I'll show you guys where it is. I tried to include maps and stuff. These are the dogs. This one's potentially a dog. This one might be a dog. This guy's got a big leash. Guy with probably a boomerang. But yeah, there's just like lots going on. Lots going on in this image, and different little cabins on the boats and stuff. Nope. Where'd that map go? Hierakonpolis is here. Hierakonpolis is south of Thebes, but it's on the Nile. Yes, they look similar to cave paintings of that time, but it is a plastered painted wall, which we don't have evidence. It is the first one we have evidence of. So yeah, very, very important site. Not much that it remains. This is what I was going to mention. So this is also potentially the site of an ancient Egyptian zoo. I don't really like using that phrase for it. But no matter what, which is what this image is, I didn't realize that I clicked it. There's just a large cemetery of a very wide range of animals, many not native to Egypt at that time. menagerie, as some people say. But yes, I guess that's the picture. I genuinely accidentally picked this picture. But yes, there's a wide range of animals that are not native to Egypt. They're all buried in this large kind of complex. I don't like saying it's a zoo because what we're looking at is a cemetery, not like a zoo complex. Like I don't think there's enough evidence to say that they were all treated really well and they were on display for other people to see. Like, that is what a zoo is in that sense. But evidence that somebody was probably wealthy enough to have brought these animals in from far away, and either they lived there or they were sacrificed and buried. Something along the lines of that, if that makes sense. But yeah, Hierakonpolis it's a collection. Yeah, who knows in what form that is, but yeah, it's a collection of animals, for sure. That is a good way to phrase it. It's like, I don't want to give it all the implications that a zoo has, where they're like conserving the animals, they're preserving them, they're treating them fairly, people are putting them on. I mean, obviously zoos don't have to have all of those things, but that is what the modern definition of a zoo is. So I don't want to put all that onto whatever that is, whatever's going on there. Let me take a drink. Okay. I was gonna say, at this point, yes, it is a cemetery. Like, I don't want to say it's a zoo because we're not looking at the archaeological remnants of cages and walkways. Like, we're looking at a cemetery. Like, that's the distinction, is that people jump to say that it's a zoo, but I'm like, but we're looking at their burials. We're not looking about what they were doing in their lives. Yeah, I meant modern definition of a zoo. Yeah, I know that. That's exactly what it is. So another site north of Luxor, north of Aswan, in between Aswan and Luxor, but it's closer to Aswan, is the site of Edfu. So Edfu's ancient Egyptian name is Betet, or Wet Jesset Hor. Its Greek name is this crazy name, Apollinopolis? Magna. Yes, indeed they did. In some ways. But this is also a Roman fort, and the city was called Apollo's Superior. So I don't know if they're necessarily identifying Apollo with Horus, but there was a Roman fort in the city called Apollo Superior. So this is the main cult city of Horus as well, and the large temple that is preserved here is also dating very late. My biggest thing is that, like, for the most part, if you see a temple that is in really, really good condition, you can assume it is Ptolemaic, unless it is Karnak or Luxor temple. Like, those are really the only other two. Like, obviously there's the Ramesseum, there's a couple of those mortuary temples, and Hatshepsut's temple, but like, really, really good condition, you can guess it's a Ptolemaic temple. It's going to be Dendera, it's going to be Edfu, it's going to be Kamambo, it's going to be Philae. It's going to be one of those. It's going to be Abu Simbel. Abu Simbel is technically older, but yeah, it's like, it's going to be a Ptolemaic pharaoh, a Ptolemaic temple. So this one specifically was built by Cleopatra VII, though probably over top of a New Kingdom temple. This temple is actually technically also dedicated to Hathor of Dendera, which we're going to talk about Dendera next. The temple was the center of several festivals to Horus, where it's essentially believed that Hathor would make a trip down from her temple in Dendera to visit Horus. And specifically, this is a later tradition where Horus and Hathor are married. It's only, I think, really in the Ptolemaic period. Yes, she is the famous Cleo. She is Cleo the Seventh. The seventh. Cleopatra the Seventh, the last one. But this is like a very, very later belief where Horus and Hathor are married. It's not really a common thread Horus doesn't really have a consort for the most part in ancient Egyptian history. So this is like Horus of Edfu is married to Hathor of Dendera specifically. So no, Hathor is a female god. Hathor is the goddess of like love and music. But no, Hathor is a female goddess. Sorry, a female god, a goddess. So the settlement of Edfu itself is really not well intact. Whatever really is left of that indicates that it was occupied earlier in the pre-dynastic age. There is no cut and dry, this is the goddess of this and no other goddesses like that. Hathor is also a goddess of motherhood, of love, or beauty, of music, of lots of different things. There is really no cut and dry thing when it comes to Egyptian gods and goddesses. There's like 5 war gods and 5 solar deities, maybe even more solar deities. So yeah, it does appear that the site was probably occupied in the pre-dynastic period, and for the most part, a lot of the pre-dynastic nations are in the south, in this area. We do know that there's actually, interestingly, a very small 3rd dynasty step pyramid, might be attributed to Pharaoh Huni, which is a new one. I've never heard of the step pyramid down here in Edfu. And then this temple to Horus is the most complete temple in Egypt today. So the entire temple had been filled with sand until 1860. And when it was cleared, the temple was really revealed to be largely intact. So this one also has a ceiling. This one also has, I think, a 2nd floor. This temple is in great condition. They came from Egypt. These are people who lived in Egypt and were, yeah. They didn't come from anywhere. They are from Egypt. I don't know how to answer that, but yeah, they're not coming from anywhere unless we're talking millions of years ago. Not Mars. So, but no, like they immigrated into Egypt millions of years ago. So arguably they did not. They are from Egypt. Now let's talk about Dendera, which I was showing you guys pictures of earlier. So this is another mainly Ptolemaic cult center in between Abydos and Thebes. So Edfu is in between Thebes and Aswan, and Dendera is up north of Thebes. So the ancient Egyptian name for it was Iunet, and then later it's called Iunet ta Necheret, meaning Iunet of the goddess. Its Greek name is Nit Entori, which probably comes from the ancient Egyptian word, like it's sort of a Greek derivative of that. And then Dendera is the Arabic name for the city. So this is one of the main cult centers for the goddess Hathor, mainly again through the Ptolemaic period, the temple being completed by Roman Emperor Tiberius. Though we can probably assume it is probably built on top of an Old Kingdom temple, possibly even dating as far back to Khufu. There seems to be some remnants of an Old Kingdom temple. But again, this is focusing on a specific version of Hathor who is seen as the wife of Horus. The Romans added a lot of different parts to this complex as well, including something called a Roman mamismi. It's just a fancy name for a chapel. And then, as I showed you briefly, there are depictions of Cleopatra the 7th, and her son, Caesarion, and emperors Domitian and Trajan, all in the Egyptian style. These are some of these temples that the Ptolemaics are commissioning to sort of appease the Egyptians. And so they are being depicted as Egyptians, and they are following the Egyptian practices. They are absolutely incorporating other non-Egyptian concepts. So like Dendera has the 2nd floor portion that has the Dendera ceiling and has all of this stuff. Hi Mark, thanks for lurking. It has all of these things that are adding to the ancient Egyptian understanding of the sky and stars and constellations. And so all of those things are sort of being taken by the Greeks. They're taken from the Mesopotamians, they're added to by the Greeks, and then they're putting them into these temples. So it's this, it doesn't look like a combination Greek-Egyptian temple, but it is. It has a lot of Greek elements that you just don't typically see. They are not obvious to the eye, let's say. So along with Edfu, like Edfu and Dendera kind of compete back and forth, but both of these are probably like the best preserved temples in all of Egypt. This is a 40,000 square meter complex, surrounded by a very heavy mud brick wall. The most impressive part of this temple is the ceiling, which I showed you guys briefly, is almost entirely preserved. It's beautifully painted. It depicts the ancient Egyptian sky, the goddess Nut, the stars and constellations on boats sailing through the skies. And as we talked about, they have a second floor of this temple that is preserved, and the staircase is famous for going up in a spiral as a falcon would fly into the sky, and then going straight down as a falcon would soar to get lower. Oh no! Oh my gosh. You can get them removed in a week or two? Dang, Mark. That's not good. Good luck. Can't believe you haven't had your wisdom teeth out. I had my wisdom teeth out in high school. I feel like I got them out so much earlier than most people. They never even came in. Oh my god, you're literally getting them out Monday? Jeez Louise. Good luck, man. And then, of course, on the upstairs of this temple is a private area for the highest of the priests and priestesses, and where the Dendera ceiling used to be, but it is not anymore. It is in Paris. All right. Oh my god, I feel like we've not gotten through anything. It's already 9 o'clock. Okay, I gotta speed run this. I gotta go faster. This is not good. Okay. Site of Buto. Buto is all the way up in the delta. Unfortunately, not a Quetzalcoatl, but yes, I know similar, but not the same thing. The Buto is in the delta. It is the cult center for one of the goddesses of Lower Egypt. It's located east of Alexandria, halfway between the Bulbatine and the Sembienic branches of the Nile. In ancient Egyptian, it is called Per Wajet, or the House of Wajet, and the Greek name is Bustos. Today it is called Tel El Faraun, or the Hill of the Pharaohs, or Kam Butu. So this site is dedicated to the goddess Wajet, who you see here. She is a goddess of Lower Egypt, later becomes the symbol of Lower Egypt with the uraei on the brow, along with Nekhbet, the vulture goddess of Upper Egypt. Both of them together are known as the Two Ladies. It's also one of the 5 names of the pharaohs, showing how important Egypt was being unified to the pharaoh. She is also closely associated with the Eye of Ra, or the Eye of Horus. And we know that there was a large temple to Wajet in the city, and there was an oracle for this goddess as well, and an annual festival. The temple was technically still standing in the Greek period. Scholars at that time compared her to the Greek goddess Leto, or Latona, who was the mother of Apollo and Artemis. Because she's cool. I don't honestly know why they make her a winged snake, but she's not always a winged snake, but she does have wings quite frequently. Honestly, not sure. So technically, this city was originally 2 separate cities, which, if you guys remember from our Book of the Dead discussion, we talked about Pe and Dep. And those are mentioned very heavily in the Book of the Dead. Pe and Dep. And then it kind of combined into Buto later. So the site dates back to the early dynastic period, and there are some very, very early sites that have been located and excavated, including a Second Dynasty palace building being discovered in the 1960s. And they've also discovered 6 Greek bathhouses as well. And in 2022, they found the remains of a small temple, but it's unclear who it was actually dedicated for. In the same vein, we want to go look at Nekheb. So this city is located back in Upper Egypt on the opposite side of the Nile of Hierakonpolis, about 50 miles south of Luxor. This ancient Egyptian site, the ancient Egyptian name was Nekheb, named after the goddess. And then its Greek name is this name that I am going to have so much troubles pronouncing. Iliathalias maybe? Polis, or the city of the goddess Iliathea. She's a Greek goddess of childbirth and midwifery and the daughter of Zeus and Hera. And today the site is called El Kab. The main cult center is for the goddess Nekhbet. So this is going to be the vulture goddess, who is one half of the two ladies. Patron of Upper Egypt. Again, makes sense. We're getting raided!
King of the south and north.
Eletheus. There's too many letters for that to be pronounced Eletheus. Hello, Raiders. Welcome on in. What were you doing? Oh, it's the United Astronomy Club. Hello. I've heard of you guys. Welcome on in, guys. What were you talking about with your science and technology?
Just do it! Make your dreams come true!
I'm doing it, Hot Cherry Red. What are you telling me to? There we go. But welcome on in, guys. My name is, let me go to Just Chat for a second. My name is MelissainDeNile. I am in denial in more ways than one. I am an Egyptologist archaeologist, and I stream Egyptology and archaeology games here on Twitch. And we also talk about ancient Egypt, and we do lectures. So tonight is one of our Beyond Denial lecture series. From March to September, I do one lecture about ancient Egypt a month, and then I get a guest to do a lecture about whatever they want to talk about per month. So we are talking about ancient Egyptian cities, mainly talking about cult centers, and then we'll go into some, this is technically part 2 lecture because the lecture got too long. And then we'll also be talking about ancient Egyptian cities that they established outside of the Nile River Valley. But I'm so glad you guys are here. Ooh, you're at the observatory. I love the stars. My dad worked for NASA for a short time, so I don't know anything about it, but I like them a lot. But yeah, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much. So we are talking about Nekheb right now. Nekheb was one of these cities that was a prominent city for the goddess Nekhbet, which is a vulture goddess. If you ever see the snake and the vulture on the forehead of Tutankhamun's mask, she is the vulture. They were a little bit big on stars. They become big on stars later. They're really big on one star. We are actually going to talk about this, Dr. Harm, with what that just said. On June 28th, we are doing a lecture with Nerdino, and we are going to talk about the history of astronomy for a lot of different ancient cultures, as well as ancient Egyptians. I also have a lecture with Moo Hoodles over on my YouTube, where we talked about a similar topic, but we also talked a lot about conspiracy theories as well. So we're kind of doing a semi-repeat lecture, but Dr. Nerdino has a couple other things about other ancient cultures and talking about astronomy. So yeah, the Egyptians really only cared about Sopdet, which is the star Sothis, or the North Star, because when it rose, then they knew that the flood was coming. But yeah, so really they are very concerned with that, and they are concerned with the stars for more calendar reasons. Stuff like the zodiac and stuff like more larger constellations don't come in until the Greeks bring Mesopotamian astronomy to Egypt in the Greco-Roman period. So, but we're going to chat about that on the 28th. Very exciting. Yes, the Greeks were very big on it, and again, we talked about it with these Dendera. So Dendera has a ceiling that is an image of the sky, but this is a Ptolemaic temple. This is a Greek temple. So they are bringing in a lot of Greek elements into temples like that, and they're including more images of skies and stuff like that. And Egyptian really just had Sopdet as the one goddess of the star Sothis. Yeah, so mostly later on. So yeah, this is Nekheb. Nekhbet is the patron goddess of Upper Egypt, so it makes sense that her cult center is in Upper Egypt. There is probably a temple to her that dates back to the early dynastic period, though it really seems like temples to her flourished more between the 18th and the 30th dynasties, so New Kingdom into the late period. And then we do know at some point in the New Kingdom, the city becomes really, really important and becomes more important than Hierakonpolis, which was just right across the river. And we talked about Hierakonpolis being like a huge pre-dynastic site. But at one point, Nekheb becomes more important during the middle or the New Kingdom. Excuse me. So what remains there today? Not much, as you can see by this complete and utter just like flat land. So this is one of the first urban centers in the early dynastic period, we predict. It at one point had massive mud brick walls that dated to the late period. Some of those are still well preserved, but and there's also a lot of important tombs from the 18th dynasty, a lot of the provincial governors of that nome, that territorial division that this was the capital of. No, please feel free to raid and run. Not a problem at all. Thank you guys so much for coming on in, and we hope to see you around and catch another stream with you. It's so nice to bring you guys over. Our next city we're going to look at is Hermonthis. Sorry, I always forget the N in this. Hermonthis. So this city is pretty close to Luxor. It's just about 12 miles south down the river. And the Egyptian name for the city is Iunu Mentet, or Heliopolis of Montu. They just like copy the name over it. And then the Greek name is Hermonthis. Today it is known as the city of Armont. And this was a big cult center for the god Montu, which, if you remember, we talked about Montu being the original patron god of the city of Waset, which then Thebes, and which is now Luxor. And it makes sense because these cities are really close together. But Montu was this one of the main war deities. I always tend to see him as like the war deity in the ancient Egyptian pantheon. He's associated with raging bulls, the strength of all the kings. But this city mainly was the most important during the Middle Kingdom, and that is when Montu is just about to get pushed out of being the patron god of Thebes. And so it makes sense that they are sort of looking for another place where Montu worship can go for. No, I did not. Is it about a bull, or is it about Egypt? Is he the star of the new God of War game? Because we were talking about that on Thursday, and I thought Sekhmet is in it. I've only seen pictures of Sekhmet in it. I haven't seen any pictures of Montu though. Montu is honestly the one I would expect to see in a war game if we're talking about God of War over Sekhmet. She's definitely a violent goddess. She's not really a war goddess in some senses. Okay. You're being silly. I was gonna say I'm probably having to make a video about the Sekhmet that's currently in it. Hi, Catherine. So you always can, if you're talking about like, there is no shame of just studying and reading and looking at academic articles, going to conferences that you have access to. If you're talking about going into schooling for ancient Egypt, really it is undergraduate. You can kind of study anything, history, art history. There are some programs that for Egyptology in undergraduate in the US, but it's very, very rare. Otherwise, it is kind of waiting until you do a master's. That's kind of you find a school that has Egyptology as a master's or as a PhD, if you're talking that type of study. Otherwise, there are amateur Egyptologists and amateur historians all the time that can continue to Yeah, you can check out the International Association of Egyptologists. They have a website that has all the BA and master's programs around the world, actually, I think. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. We are doing a lecture right now, but feel free. You can always ask any other questions. Yeah, researching at home is absolutely possible. Like, looking for good books, watching decent, good documentaries. You can also access, if you make an account with JSTOR, you can read up to 100 articles for free. As long as they're through like that program, you can read 100 articles for stuff. So there are plenty of ways to just research and pick a topic that you like and continue to kind of go into it. There are, if you're in the US, there are conferences that you can go to as just an amateur or as somebody who's interested in ancient Egypt. They are not going to stop you if you ever want to go and to do that. True. You can also, yes, you can also join our Discord, and you have people who can get you articles for things that are unaccessible. But yeah, so it is always possible. Reading, studying, being curious, really. Just being curious and following that curiosity to help you learn more and asking questions. Yes, the link is in my bio over on TikTok. And we're not the most active Discord, but we're not the most unactive Discord. There's plenty of places to ask questions, look for articles. I need to make, one of my projects I might do tomorrow, because I need like something to like kill my brain cells, is I have a resource folder of like, I have so many scanned books and so many scanned like documents, and I've been wanting to organize them, and I realized I should probably put them all in Excel spreadsheets so that if somebody asks me if I have one, I know where it is. And so I think I might kill some brain cells and watch some movies and just do that all tomorrow, because I'm so close to finishing it, but I keep saving more articles. Yeah, no, that's PhDs are too long. You don't want to do a PhD. So again, the city is a city of Hermonthis is more important during the Middle Kingdom, when Montu is getting pushed out of being the patron god of Thebes for Amun. So the temple for Montu in Hermonthis was probably built as early as the 11th dynasty, and it is believed that Mentuhotep II built that temple, or even built the city, because it makes sense. Montu is in his name. Mentuhotep, he is Montuhotep. So yeah, it is probably very closely associated with Mentuhotep II. We know that the temple was added onto in the 12th dynasty and then later in the New Kingdom, but it may have been destroyed in the late period and then was probably rebuilt in the Ptolemaic period. We know that Cleopatra and her son Caesarion added a birth house and a sacred lake to the temple, and there are also 2 Roman gates that were added to the temple. Because of Montu's association with bulls, we do know that there was something called a bucium, which is essentially a burial place for the sacred Bucus bulls north of the city, which is essentially a serapeum, but for Bucus bulls. And those mostly date to the late period and then all the way into the 4th century CE. The temple is located in the center of town. It's not really well preserved, unfortunately. It seems to have been, especially from like a drawing like this, it seems to have been pretty well preserved in the 19th century, but it unfortunately was recycled to build a sugar factory. So really all that remains is the pylon of Thutmose III, which is apparently visible today, and I did not pull a picture of it. Apologies for that. I must drink water. Yes, I think there is a pylon that you can see, but I obviously forgot to grab a picture of it. So I'm going to quickly do this before we do the ad. I think I can do this quickly. So this is a city called Chebu in Middle Egypt, near the modern city of Asut. Its Egyptian name is Jeukat, or High Mountain, and its Greek name is Antiopolis, after the Hellenized name of the god Nemti, or Antius. And this was the cult center for 2 different gods and goddesses. One of them is Nempti. We talked about Nempti last time because of some of the gnomes that we were looking at. Nempti is the god of the ferryman, who is typically depicted as a falcon on a boat. And there was a large temple that was probably built mostly by Ptolemaic pharaohs and the Roman emperor to Nempti or Antonaeus, I think is how you say it. Apparently it was a very large temple, 18 column pronaos, 12 column hypostyle hall. The god in this city is seen sort of as a warrior fusion of Set and Horus. No, they did not pronounce their T's as S's. It is Chebu. They have 2 S's and they have 2 T's in ancient Egyptian phonetics. There also appears to have been a cult center to the goddess Nephthys, who was worshipped very heavily at this temple or possibly in a close shrine nearby. She may have been seen as sort of a corresponding female power to Nepti. Chebu. Yeah, Chebu. I'm using the J as it's complicated. I think it's a T. I think it's second T, which is technically a ch sound. But it's second T versus first T. Unfortunately, most of the temple was destroyed in the 19th century. You can obviously see a drawing of it here, but it has been excavated for a while. There's also many quarries and tombs outside of the city that have reliefs of both of the deities I mentioned, and our very famous beaded dress. Although this is not the famous one, this is the beaded dress at the Petrie Museum. This was excavated in this city when Petrie excavated it. Also, I love the second name with the 2 sandals in the hieroglyphs. Oh my god, it's perfect timing. This is the last of the cult centers we're talking about. All right, we're gonna have an ad. Throw any questions in the chat, and after the ad, we will start with the Oases, which I'm so excited to talk about. That's what they are. They're sandals. They're flip-flops. Honestly, not much. There's no city around the pyramids. So really it was like all the mastabas weren't as buried obviously in sand. But there's no city around the pyramids. The pyramids, the valley temples had lakes that like went up to it. So it would have had more, a closer access to water. Yes, but not in the sense that there would be grass everywhere. But yeah, it would have been built up maybe a little bit. There probably would have been trees and small gardens in some spaces, but it would not all be green. Because they have closer access to water, because that valley temple had a harbor, they could bring water closer to like do some sparse watering, but it would not be green, I guess. I don't know if it had benches. For the most part, people would not be visiting the pyramids. They would be visiting the temples. So they'd be visiting the Valley Temple. I don't think it's necessarily a huge place that people would visit. Priests would be walking around. Ancient Egypt was not a lush green forest. Ancient Egypt in the pre-dynastic period was like a savanna. That's not a lush green forest, that's not a rainforest, but that is a more wet environment than it is now. But starting in the Old Kingdom, it started to get drier and drier as the Saharification happened, where the Sahara is slowly but surely encroaching onto the Nile Valley. And it's getting drier and drier. And again, that's why all those animals are migrating south, and why sometimes you see them in rock art dating to the pre-dynastic period, but you don't see them in depictions in the Old Kingdom or the Middle Kingdom or the New Kingdom. I'm trying to think if I have potato chips. I need something salty, but I don't want corn nuts. Give me 2 seconds. I know I have like 20 seconds in the ad. No. No, I don't want to crunch while I talk. And they dry my mouth out. So I don't want to choke. I also have an empty bag of corn nuts here, so I think I snacked on them last night. Well, popcorn's not much better, but I just needed something salty. I have no idea what you're talking about. Addicted with bringing a what Mediterranean island are they? And what do you mean by basin? I'm very confused by all the words in that sentence. Yay! We'll get to Siwa, but yes, we will include Siwa in this talk. Okay. So first we're going to go over the oases of ancient Egypt. And we are going to... Some of these oases, like, this is kind of confusing. These oases nowadays have multiple cities inside of them. Most of the time we don't even know how many cities there are in any one part of this, and so it's a little confusing. Yeah, I don't know how to describe this. How it's a little confusing with these because there's not necessarily cities in here, and some of them don't have Egyptian names. So yeah, it's a whole big thing. So the word oasis actually comes from Demotic Egyptian, originally for dwelling place. But basically, for those who don't know, an oasis is a fertile area of desert or a semi-desert environment. It actually does not necessarily have to have water present on the surface, meaning that an oasis can still count as an oasis if the water is only accessible by wells, which is very fascinating to me. Because you sort of expect something like this out in the middle of the desert. But Egypt technically has 11 oases. We're not going to talk about all of them. We're really only going to talk about the ones that are heavily occupied during the Pharaonic period and ones that have remains. But I think almost every single one is in this, maybe not every single one, but we will be talking about Siwa, we will be talking about Fayum, we will be talking about Bahariya, Farafra, I can't say that one. We will be talking about Dakhla, and we will be talking about Karaga, and we'll be talking about one more that's up here in the delta, or near the delta. Yeah, to be honest, I could not find an oasis on the eastern side, in the eastern desert. I don't think there's really any. I assume maybe that has to do with tectonic plates and, fault lines and such, but I'm not sure. I don't think there's really any oases on the in the eastern desert. I tried to look at that up and I can't remember. There were a few of these oases that are not very well known, so I couldn't really even find enough research if it was occupied during the Pharaonic period, so we could not include all of those. If I could find somebody who could talk about it, but... So, the first one we're going to talk about is the Fayum Oasis, which is not very far off, obviously, the Nile River Valley, but it's still an oasis, so we're talking about it in this section. This is the largest oasis in Egypt. It's just south of Cairo, and also where the ancient city of Memphis would be. There's not actually a name for the Fayum Oasis. There's only a name. I'm going to talk about one city that's inside the oasis, Crocodilopolis, which is what all that the Egyptian name and the Greek name is from. But the oasis itself doesn't have a name, as most of these don't. So the interesting part about the Fayum Oasis is that the lake and the oasis was sort of first created when the Nile would periodically overflow, which was first recorded around 3000 BCE. But really, it would only fill with when the floodwaters was high until around 2300 BCE, when there was a natural canal that is now called, which you can see sort of here, is now called the Bahr Youssef, I think is what it's called. When that canal was then widened and deepened, and so now the Nile River actually feeds this lake. So it is both a oasis that the water is coming there sort of naturally, but then it is also now being fed by the Nile. Around this time, we know that the 12th dynasty pharaohs were using the Fayum Oasis and the lake as a reservoir. Yes, they were, Dr. Harmon. We're going to talk about them. So again, there's not really an ancient Egyptian name or even a Greek name for the entire oasis. They usually kind of just go by city name. And there are a few different cities within the Fayum Oasis. The problem I have with the Fayum Oasis is that there's the Fayum Oasis, and then today the main city in the Fayum Oasis is Fayum. I have found a lot of difficulty, distinguishing the two. That something says, oh yeah, it happened in Fayum, and I can't tell if they're talking about the larger Fayum Oasis or if they're talking about the city of Fayum. It's a whole big thing. I really was having a lot of trouble trying to figure out the difference between the two, and it just was kind of hard. So the only one that I'm talking about today is Crocodilopolis, but there's a lot of other cities or smaller villages in the Pharaonic period that would have been located here. So the ancient Egyptian city of Crocodilopolis obviously means crocodile city. The ancient Egyptian name was Shedet or Payam. The second one, Payam, means the sea or the lake. Now note, there are two separate cities named Crocodilopolis. Both are cult centers for the god Sobek. This is the one that's in the Fayum, but then there's also one in Upper Egypt. Today, Crocodilopolis is known as the city of Fayum. The city of Fayum is essentially on top of the remains of the city of Crocodilopolis. And again, it's very hard to rope it all together. And I should mention, the other city of Crocodilopolis has a different Egyptian name. It is just that the Greeks named two different cities Crocodilopolis, which is what we talked about before, because there's two Hermopolises. There's two, what was the other one? There's two, Magna and Parva. There are a lot of times that the Greeks are naming things the bigger or the smaller. So it's not totally uncommon for the Greek period. So apparently, the main deity of this city is going to be Sobek. This is another cult center. This is also why I wanted to include this. So although we know the Fayum has been occupied probably from at least the Old Kingdom, it only really becomes a really big cult center during the Ptolemaic period, when the city and the entire oasis is being occupied mostly by Greeks. Apparently at that time, they also worshipped a tamed crocodile, who was named Petsukos, or the son of Sukos or Sobek. And this crocodile was adorned with gold and gems. He had a special temple pond, and it was fed by priests and guests of the temple. And very similar to the Apis bulls, when this crocodile died, they would replace it with another crocodile. So unfortunately, similar to the Nile Delta, this is a very wet area. So archaeology is not very good for different remains because it is such a wet environment in comparison to the more deserty areas. So there are a lot of archaeological sites in this area. We have the Lahoun pyramids, we have Hawara, the Hawara pyramid and their necropoli, we have Qasr Quran, which has a Ptolemaic temple, and then very close but outside of this outside of the oasis, we have something called the Valley of the Whales, which is a paleontological site, which is a giant valley where tons of whale skeletons have been found because it used to be an ocean millions of years ago. And that is very close to an area of the Fayum. And the ancient city of Crocodilopolis is still marked by the mounds in the north of the city of Fayum today. One of the only, well, not the only, but one of the only oases that is not technically a city that we're going to talk about because I felt like it was important enough is we're going to talk about Wadi Natrun. So this is such an important site for ancient Egyptian funerary practices. Technically is considered a depression. It's not an oasis, but I digress. It is so much more north than I ever expected. So it is kind of hard to see in this map, but it is up here in the delta, essentially. It's just off of sort of the most western branch of the Nile. And what we do know is that, and I wish I could find like an actual list of this, but it's just every so often when I was doing this research, it kept getting repeated. Apparently the Temple of Edfu has a list of 7 oases that was obviously known about in the Ptolemaic period. This gets listed as one of those 7 oases. I have tried to find documentation of those, and I have kind of been fallen bupkis on it. But apparently there were 7 oases written on some inscription at the Temple of Edfu, and this is included in it. So as a depression, it means that it's just below sea level. So this one is 75 feet below sea level and 125 feet below the Nile River level. And that means that this area is full of all these alkali lakes, salt and freshwater marshes, and these natron-rich salt deposits. So for the ancient Egyptians, this was called Shet Hemaut, and the Greeks called this Sektis or Seket. And today we know it as the Wadi El Natrun, or the Valley of Natron. In Coptic, it's also called the Mountain of Salt. This is one of 2 sites where the ancient Egyptians would get their natron salt. The other second location is called Bir Natrun, and that's located actually in modern Sudan. Now, natron is a little different than table salt. It's actually a mixture of sodium bicarbonate, aka baking soda, sodium chloride, and sodium sulfate. It is naturally occurring, so this is one of the main places in Egypt where this mixture occurs. And natron is, while it is used in the mummification process to dry out bodies, it's also used to create faience. And it is also used by the Romans to make glass. We also know, interestingly enough, that there were quite a few battles between the Egyptians and the Libyans that were fought here, mostly during the New Kingdom, which is kind of fascinating. I mean, it makes sense. It's the most eastern or the western part of the Delta, close-ish to the Med, so it would make sense that they would be fighting Libyans in this area. Unfortunately, I don't think there's much evidence of any like large cities or even maybe factories or mining towns that really survive in this area. But some excavations have found some melting furnaces for the production of glass by the Romans. And today it's actually one of the most important centers for Coptic monasticism, with several monasteries still located in this area today. Next oases. All right, we are moving middle-ish Egypt, more west than a little southwest of Fayum. This is the Bahariya Oasis. This is out in the Western Desert, southwest, again, of the Fayum Oasis. This was called Jess, it's very hard to say, or Wat Mehetet, or meaning the Northern Oasis. That first name, the Jess, is rarely found, but it has been discovered on a scarab dating to the Middle Kingdom, and in the account of King Kamos, who apparently occupied this oasis during his war against the Hyksos people. And then it appears this oasis was mostly used from the 25th dynasty and on. The second name that that name was used from the 25th dynasty and on, and the second name Wat Mehetet was used during the New Kingdom on, again, the list of oases in the Temple of Edfu. I could not find a Greek name, but there was a Latin name for it, which was Oasis Parva, or Small Oasis, just for funsies. We also know that this sometimes is called the Oasis of Oxyrhynchus in Coptic, or the Oasis of Banasa, which means the same thing. And today it is known as Al-Wahat al-Baria, meaning the Northern Oasis. So they're just changing the language, but meaning the exact same thing pretty much. This oasis has a lot of different cities in it. El Batiti is one of the largest of the cities inside of this oasis. I can't go over all the cities because some don't have any known archaeological remains, but we think that it has been occupied since the pre-dynastic period, but really not consistently. They have found a settlement dating to the Old Kingdom in an area called Karat el Abayed. There have been rock inscriptions found in El Hara dating to the Middle Kingdom, and there is a tomb of Amenhotep called Hui in Karat Hilwa that dates to the 18th dynasty. It appears that this oasis is really flourishing much later in the 26th dynasty and then into the Greco-Roman period. Not much is still standing today. We don't really even know if there was a main cult deity worshipped there. But if y'all saw one of my most recent TikToks, you would know that there is one goddess who has been the only place that she has ever been recorded is in the Bahariya Oasis. And that is the hedgehog goddess of Abaset. Yes, she is a hedgehog goddess. She is typically just depicted as a woman with a crown with a hedgehog on it. But she only appears 3 different times in 2 different tombs in El Batiti. Batiti. I can't say that name. So she's definitely not a cult goddess if she only is appearing in 2 separate tombs, but she is worshipped here out in this oasis. There is also a ruined temple to the god Amun, built by, supposedly, or we'll say commissioned by Alexander the Great in Qasr el Mekizba. It is believed that Alexander the Great may have passed through this oasis to get to Siwa. If you can see where Siwa is on this map. If you are traveling from Memphis, it doesn't totally make sense, but it also makes sense because there's nothing out in this area. But we also, if Alexander went anywhere south of it, it makes sense. He could have essentially gone down past the Fayum Oasis, go to the Bahariya, and go to Siwa. We also know that there was a Greco-Roman necropolis found in the city in 1995. It is known as the Valley of the Golden Mummies, and I have a fancy book. I don't know where it is, but I have a very fancy book all about the Valley of the Golden Mummies, and about the excavations in 1995 that you can check out. I think it's also called the Valley of the Golden Mummies. If I remember correctly, it might be by Zahia Loss. Or at least his name was on it somewhere. But I think he was part of the excavation team, so that's fine with me. Alright. The one you guys have all been waiting for. Let's talk about Siwa. It is probably one of the more well-known oases, but I do also feel like it's probably only known about a lot more because of Assassin's Creed Origins. This oasis, if you look back on our map, is the furthest one from the Nile River Valley. It is almost to the border of modern Libya, and it's essentially directly west of the Fayum. So hedgehogs are native to Africa. They are native to Africa, and I don't know if there are hedgehogs in particular, but they are desert animals, which is wild to think about. But they are native to northern Africa. I would love to see if there are a lot in that oasis, though. The ancient Egyptian name for Siwa is Seket Yamu, meaning the field of trees, which, based on the hieroglyphs, is super obvious. It doesn't necessarily have a clear Greek name, but it seems to have been called Ammonium by classical authors, but it's unclear like what classical authors, like what time period that is. I don't know if hedgehogs are considered vermin in the UK, but they are native to Africa and weirdly the Iberian Peninsula, but I think they were brought over to the Iberian Peninsula by somebody. But yeah, hedgehogs are rampant, supposedly in Egypt. So we know the site Siwa has been occupied for at least 10,000 plus years, but mostly by Berber or Amazigh peoples. That is a more native indigenous people name for people living in Libya. Amazigh is the more correct term. Do you want, Dr. Harm, are you asking for the hedgehog goddess to be one of our stream avatars? Is that what you're asking? Because that would be really funny. The unfortunate thing is that she doesn't have the head of a hedgehog. That's the problem, is that she's not depicted with the head of the hedgehog. She's just depicted with the hedgehog sitting on her head. Yeah, so this is what I said. The goddess Abaset, I did a TikTok on her. She's very recently. It's on my YouTube page if you want to check it out. Her name is Abaset. She is a hedgehog deity. We literally only know of her about. She's depicted 3 times in 2 different tombs in 1 location in Egypt. No. She has this sort of, it's not a modius, she has sort of this flat-topped crown, and then the hedgehog sits on top of it. To be honest, it doesn't even look like a hedgehog. It looks like a lump. I'm being very honest. It doesn't even have quills. Like, it doesn't show all of the quills, so it kind of just looks like a lump. She's sweet, but, yeah, I am gonna plan to ask to get some more stream avatars, and I think we'll do what we did last time where we voted. So we can pick some gods and goddesses, and we'll vote on which ones you guys want to see added to the stream avatar collection. I gotta do a lot of admin stuff in the next couple weeks, but I was supposed to do it tomorrow, and I don't feel like it. Which sucks because I really need to do it tomorrow. But I think I need a day. Okay, where was I? Okay, so yes, so the site has probably been occupied for like 10,000 years, but mostly again by indigenous nomadic peoples kind of between Libya and Egypt. When you really get to the connection with like the more Egyptian presenting peoples, it really actually doesn't start until the 26th dynasty. It's much later than Egyptians bringing sort of Egyptian concepts and Egyptian culture to the area. And the 26th dynasty is kind of an ironic point of this because it's the last native dynasty before Persian conquest. And so we do know that there was a necropolis established during this time period as well. But the funny thing about this is at the same time, you actually are getting Greek settlers from Cyrene that are also starting to settle in Siwa. And Cyrene is a coastal city in modern Libya, but in comparison is not too far from Siwa. So this site is honestly a very big mixing of cultures, very early on in comparison to like in this 26th dynasty, they all start kind of coming together. And this is really when the site gets a much bigger cult center, and it becomes a really big cult center for Amun and Amun-Ra. Mostly, this is in the Greek period, in the Ptolemaic period. Like, obviously the Temple of Karnak is still around, and there's that, but it's very, very far away. And this is also a combination of Zeus Amun. So this is a Greek version of Amun, called Zeus Amun. That is a great question, Baha. I don't know. I don't think those are ancient. I think those are Egyptian houses, like our more modern Egyptian houses. Because if you look at the, like, obviously these sort of look like ruins, but like this house looks exactly the same to this house, even though the roof is still up. I don't know. That's a great question. I was pulling crazy photos on this. I just was trying to pick visually nice photos without looking them up. No, that's definitely a mosque up there. I didn't grab any pictures because there's not a lot of remnants of the temple, unfortunately, in Siwa. There's really not a lot left, so I couldn't grab any photos of that. So we do know that this temple, though, is very, very important in the Greek period because Alexander the Great travels to Siwa during his campaign over Egypt, and it appears that he sought this place out specifically because of an oracle that was centered at his temple. And the oracle confirmed that he was of a divine personage and he was a legitimate pharaoh of Egypt. As I've mentioned, oracles, there are some evidence that there are oracles during the Pharaonic Age of Egypt, but for the most part, I have found that oracles only start showing up in ancient Egyptian temples when the Greeks are in Egypt. I think oracles are, like, there are something called the 7 Hathors. Those are sort of oracles, but they're not called an oracle because an oracle is, I'm pretty sure, probably a Greek word. But when you hear of an oracle in a temple, more than likely it is a Ptolemaic temple, a Ptolemaic oracle. So Siwa is still a thriving oasis today. They've had some trouble with Egypt proper in the past, unfortunately. The temple with the oracle is still, there's some remains in a city called Aghermi. It's not in the best shape, unfortunately. And we do know there's a Roman era necropolis with rock cut tombs. Interestingly, this was a slight rabbit hole that I went on to. In 1995, a Greek archaeologist claimed that she found the tomb of Alexander the Great in Siwa. And she apparently started excavations earlier in 1989 and essentially found this Hellenistic tomb with a lion statue by the entrance. There's also lots of inscriptions and carvings in the tomb. It is not a pyramid. That's a natural formation. So this archaeologist appears to have announced that she found the tomb of Alexander the Great. But then the Greek ambassador, I guess, in Egypt was like trying to put a stop in it and essentially convinced Egypt to pull her permit. So I don't think anything has happened to try and confirm this. It seems like she's been in a legal battle for like 30 years. I don't know. Something very random on the Siwa Wikipedia page that I didn't have time to like fully go deep in. Welcome on in. We are talking about the Siwa Oasis, although we just finished talking about the Siwa. We're talking about other oases in Egypt as cities and places that Egyptians occupied outside of the Nile River Valley. But hello, welcome on in. All right. Karga. I don't know how to pronounce this one. Karga? Arga? Sounds weird when I say it. This is in southern Egypt. It's kind of directly west of Luxor. It's not actually too far out from the Nile in comparison to some of the other oases. This is the southernmost oasis in the modern Egyptian border. And it is actually like one of the largest ones. I think Fayum is technically a little bit larger, but I think it is one of the largest oases in the Western Desert. Probably second largest. The ancient Egyptian name for it was Kenmet, or the vineyard. Also was Wat Resut Heb, or the southern oasis of Hibis. The Greek name was He Extorio, or the outer, and to the other Romans, it is also called Oasis Magna, the big oasis. This was part of a much larger trade route called the Darb el Arban, or the Way of 40. 40 means 40 days. This is essentially a large path that takes you about 40 days, and it's going from Egypt in through this oasis and then heading towards the Sudan. And more than likely, this is a way to sort of get away from the cataracts on the Nile, and sort of go, it's almost going to oasis to oasis to oasis until you get back to the Nile. This was likely in operation in the Old Kingdom as a way. Thank you, Rube Goldberg Machine. Thank you for the follow. Welcome on in. It was likely in operation in the Old Kingdom for transporting things like gold, ivory, spices, wheat, animals, plants, lots of other things between Egypt and Nubia. Today, there is a temple to the god Hibis just north of Karga. This is the largest and best preserved temple in the oasis, as well as it's the only, which I thought this was fascinating, it's the only intact structure in Egypt that dates to the Saite period. Technically the Saite Persian period, which combines two periods together, but it's 664 to around 404 BCE. Hibis is a combination of two local gods, or two local forms of the god Amun. So Amun of Hibis and Amun Ra of Karnak, who dwells in Hibis. And so Hibis is this combination of these two gods. But what the heck is Hibis? So Hibis is a city that is a town within this larger oasis. It also is Hebet in Egyptian. So Hebet means the plow. And the city of Hibis was constructed in Dynasty 26, most likely under Pharaoh Psamtik II. And there was probably a New Kingdom temple and possibly a 25th Dynasty temple on the same grounds. And then during the 27th Dynasty, which is our first Persian period, the Persian king Darius I took more of an active part in actually building the temple there, which is really unique because for the most part, the Persians didn't really do anything in Egypt. Like when they were ruling over in Egypt, they didn't really build anything. They didn't really do much at all. So we do also know that other pharaohs in the 29th and 30th dynasties and in the Ptolemaic period and in the Roman period also continued to add to this temple. There is also another temple in the southernmost part of the oasis in a city called Dush, which is my favorite name. And there are tons of Greek and or Roman sites throughout the oasis. And another fun fact about this oasis, in 2016, it was announced that the meteorite dagger of Tutankhamun had similar proportions of metal to another meteorite that was found in this oasis. So it could have came from the exact same meteor shower, which is super cool. So the piece of iron that made the dagger could have been found here in the oasis and brought to Thebes, or brought somewhere to be made for him. Yeah, that was a fun fact. It had very, very similar, because I think the dagger is like a certain percent iron and then a certain percent tin and a certain percent nickel. And the percentages were so close to this other meteorite that it more than likely means that it came from the same meteorite shower, because it would have come from the same meteorite. Which is really cool. Okay. Going back to the map of the Oases so you guys can see where we are. So there's Karga, which is pretty long this way. Now we're going to talk about Dakla, and then the next one we're going to talk about is Farfa. So we're going more north again. We went really south and now we're going north. So kind of just northwest of Karga is the Dakla Oasis. I can't find any Egyptian name for this oasis. Google AI says it's named Kenmut, but I don't believe them. I can't find any sources on saying that it is Kenmut, so. And then I also can't find any Greek name. Today is called El Wahat El Dakla, meaning the inner oasis. This oasis appears to have been occupied from at least the Old Kingdom and on. We have it very, very interestingly, because we talked about this a couple streams ago. I don't know why we talked about this. I think it was just a question that came up. We have actually at this site discovered hieratic scripts incised in clay tablets, which is a new one for me because I did not think that you could incise hieratic in clay tablets. And I think I actively told you guys that it did not happen because it did not make sense in my brain, because hieratic is a little bit more cursive-like. It is more free-flowing than cuneiform, which is very strict lines, and you use this stylus to poke the same shape over and over again in just different ways. I fibbed. This is a new thing for me. More than likely, this is probably because of like desperate times. Yes, but that is carved. That is not a clay tablet. So we're talking like a clay tablet, like a cuneiform tablet, which is raw clay before being baked. The Rosetta Stone, actually the Rosetta Stone doesn't have hieratic on it. It has demotic, and that is a carved stone. But yeah, similar but not the same. More than likely, this is because of desperate times call for desperate measures, because they are extremely far from any papyrus production centers. And so apparently about 500 of these clay tablets were found in a governor's palace, dating to the 6th dynasty. Demotic and hieratic are very similar. Demotic is a later version of hieratic. It is that cursive form. It's just not hieratic. They're very similar, but technically it's hieroglyphs, demotic, Greek. So yeah, it was because they just don't have any papyrus. And they probably had ostraca, but they wanted to use clay tablets. Again, it's sort of because they're out there so isolated that they can sort of independently invent something rather than sort of being influenced by what they're doing over in Egypt, in the Nile Valley. It would be super fascinating to see that if there was 0 ostraca found here, that would 100% tell me that they had such little interaction with people of the Nile River Valley that the people of the Nile River Valley started writing on ostraca with ink, and the people of the Dakla Oasis were just carving into clay. And that's completely different. They're so separate from that. It'd be really fascinating to look and see if there was that. God damn it, I keep dropping the popcorn. Yes, so they do, but they're writing in cuneiform. So all the Amarna letters are written in cuneiform. And if they are sending it to, technically the Amarna letters are all the Mesopotamian response letters that Egypt is receiving, but Egypt is probably also has somebody skilled. Obviously they have to have somebody skilled enough to read the cuneiform, so they had to have had somebody who was writing in cuneiform. Yeah, so almost all the Amarna letters, and presumably what Egypt was sending them, is written on clay tablets in cuneiform, not in Egyptian and stuff. Yeah. So one of the modern cities in the Oasis is actually called Mut el Karab, or Mut, and historically was called Monthus as well. So in the Oasis now, there is a Roman sandstone temple on the western edge of the Oasis for the Theban triad Amun, Ra, Mut, and Khonsu. And Set is also included in this. He is one of the main deities in this Oasis region. And then this temple was built by Roman Emperor Nero, and then also decorated by Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian. So all Roman sites. And the last oasis that we're going to look at technically is also a depression, not an oasis, but here nor there. They seem very similar at this point. This is located in Middle Egypt. Yes, there is a big bioarch project in Dakhla. I've heard that too. And so after Siwa, this is the westernmost oasis. So in ancient Egyptian, it's called the Ta-Ihut, or the Ta-Ihu, or the Ta-Ihut, meaning the land of cattle. It's unclear if it had a Greek name, though it is technically part of the Oxyrhynchite Nome, even though it's pretty far away from the Nile River Valley and part of the actual part of the Nome. The modern name is Farafra. Oh my god. Farafra. And it's Arabic for fizzy spring, which made me laugh. Fizzy spring. So this site was also probably occupied in the early pre-dynastic period, but only really begins to be mentioned in ancient Egyptian texts around the Middle Kingdom. There are more than 100 wells or springs in this area, many of which are natural and sulfuric, which is why it would be called a fizzy spring. And honestly, I could not find a lot of evidence of any sort of ruins there today. It is part of the White Desert National Park, or the Sahara El Baida. And this area is just north of the depression, has these large chalk formations called yardangs, which, if you guys remember us talking about sphinxes, that's a yardang. And that is more than likely what the natural formation of the Sphinx of Giza is made out of. Essentially, it is made out of a natural eroding wind erosion monument. And the natural springs are also a really popular tourist destination because of their warmth and sulfur attributes. I know that the White Desert sounds like a very, very cool place to go to. I would really like to go there one day. Yes, good healing waters. Absolutely. All right, we're on to the Sinai Peninsula. These are some of the most interesting ones I learned about. So we still have the Sinai Peninsula, Nubia, and the Levant. We still have to talk about. But I was very excited to learn about some of the ones here in the Sinai Peninsula. So the entire Sinai Peninsula was called Bia'u, meaning the mining country, also called Ketiu Mafkat, or the funny word for ladders of turquoise. I don't know why they were using the word ladders, but ladders of turquoise. In the Greek period, it's actually called the Arabia Petria. I can't, AE's messed me up. The origin of the modern name is still argued about, the word Sinai, but it might have derived from the ancient Mesopotamian moon god Sin, or it comes from the Hebrew word Seneh, probably. So people have been located in this area since at least the 5th or 4th millennium BCE. We know that the ancient Egyptians mined turquoise in this area starting in the first dynasty at 2 different locations that we're going to talk about next. It's also much more mountainous than ancient Egypt, than like the Nile Valley, or in the Delta. It is much more mountainous. You can see sort of topographically, especially down here at the bottom. Much more mountainous, but also very deserty, kind of deep in the center. There's not a lot going on here. So let's look at some cities that we're gonna see on this map. This was a super interesting one to read about. So this is Serabit El Kadim. This is a mining site. It's in the southwest-ish of the peninsula. And I will say, because they're not necessarily, a lot of these places are not necessarily cities, sometimes we don't have ancient Egyptian or ancient Greek names for these places. We only have the Arabic names of what's been given today. Serabit El Kadim means the columns of the slave, which is a reference to what you see here, which are these surviving columns of a temple that was at the site. So this is a very important mining center for 3 main things: copper, malachite, and turquoise. Copper is the really big one for this site in specific, but all 3 of them I think were mined in this area. So this was used throughout the Middle Kingdom and then into the New Kingdom. We can assume that a lot of the miners who are working here might be prisoners of war from the Middle East. It does depend on the time period for sure. Archaeologists think that in some cases they actually might have been Canaanites or Phoenician in origin. And mainly this is because at this site there is a very specific type of script that has been discovered only here. It is not ancient Egyptian, and it is not Canaanite. It is not a Near Eastern language. So Flinders Petrie discovered it at the site in 1904. He called it a Proto-Sinaitic script. It is some of the earliest examples of alphabetic writing, dating back to the 16th century BCE. This is a combination of Egyptian hieroglyphs and Canaanite writings into an alphabetic language rather than an ideographic language. So each symbol is not meant to represent something else. It is more of an alphabet like today. It's fascinating. There's a couple pictures on the Wikipedia about it. I don't know if it's been translated. I can't remember. I feel like Petrie translated a little bit of it, but I cannot remember at this time. Hello, Scott. Welcome on in. So the City of the Dead is not a real place. We are talking about sites in the Sinai Peninsula right now. At least I think what you're referring to is not a real place. But we're going through ancient Egyptian cities that are not located. Well, I don't know which one you're referring to. Like, does it have an actual Egyptian name, or are you talking about, like, isn't the City of the Dead from the Mummy movie? I don't know. I might be wrong. We're going through ancient Egyptian cities. Yeah, Hamunaptra is not a real place. Unfortunately not. Yeah, it is not a real. No, that's okay. Again, why do we have to make up names for fake places when we can use real names? Why do we have to make up mythologies for movies? But yes, sadly, Hamunaptra. That's also not even a great Egyptian word. There are hundreds of necropoli in Egypt because necropoli is just a cemetery. I guess it's copyright reasons, but ancient Egyptian names are not copyrighted, though, I'm sure. Like, I'm sure you wouldn't be able to use Luxor, but you could use Waset. You could use Tanis in, Indiana Jones. Copyright's probably not the same thing. Yeah, that's true. They would have trouble copywriting it. It's definitely fine. Yeah, I'm just always like, there's so many different... Ooh, city names can't be copyrighted? I don't think so. Yes, apparently. Open domain. Learning new things every day. I have gone inside pyramids. I've gone inside 2 pyramids and walked up to the entrance of 2 more. Or a few more. No, wait, I've gone inside 3 pyramids. I was wrong. I've gone inside 3. Djoser, Khufu, and Teddy. And then I walked up to the entrance of the bench and the entrance of the red pyramid, but I didn't go inside. Because it's too claustrophobic. Alright, sorry, I'm having my snack break. Alright, Yep, all 3 of those are famous tombs. I mean, the Great Pyramid of Giza is the tomb of Khufu, so. I mean, they're all famous to me, but I would say, I guess, the Step Pyramid, Djoser, and the Pyramid of Khufu are the more famous. Seti does not have a pyramid. I didn't go into Seti's tomb in the Valley of the Kings because it is $70 to go inside of it. And I didn't want to pay that much. But I did go into 11 other tombs in the Valley of the Kings in one day, which is not what typically people do. But yeah, those aren't pyramids, those are just tombs. Sorry, there's a hard part of a kernel I'm crunching on. Alright. I just want to make sure we're going to have enough time to do this. I think we will. We're almost done. Sort of. Sort of. The Djoser and the Step Pyramid are the same one. But that's okay. That's the only ones the popular media talks about. Yep, exactly, Friend at Arms. Was the hot new thing. Yeah, the Step Pyramid is the Pyramid of Djoser. Okay, so what is still in Serabit al-Qadim? It isn't really a full city. It's a mining city. So it's really focused on the mines, and it's really focused on, obviously, a smaller mining village to support those who are living there mining. It has been heavily investigated by archaeologists. As I mentioned, Flinders Petrie excavated here. It's definitely one of the best examples of a mining village that we honestly have preserved. So many different parts of this mining camp have been discovered along with a temple, which you see here, and some chapels. Interestingly, the temple is dedicated to Hathor, and it is found sort of outside of Serabit al-Qadim, along with another site called Wadi Magara, which we're going to talk about next. Hello, Starbucks. No problem. We're talking about sites in the Sinai Peninsula. All this will go on YouTube shortly. I'm going to try to even put it up tomorrow for you guys. They are mining for mainly copper, turquoise, and malachite in this area. Mostly copper, but those are the main 3. Bent. I was going to say, I love the Bent Pyramid. Everyone needs to know about the Bent Pyramid. This temple was... Hi, Spook! Welcome on in! The temple was probably built sometime during the Middle Kingdom. You can see this little map of what it probably looked like at one point, and it says the oldest part is back there in the back. Possibly around the reign of Senusret I, and then was reconstructed during the New Kingdom. Hathor is an odd goddess, to be honest, to have all the way out here in this kind of mining country. But in this case, she may have been sort of seen as this guide for the pharaohs to kind of help find the minerals and the materials in the mines, as well as someone to glorify the actual power of the pharaoh, even though they were so far away from the capital city. And we do know that other chapels were found with stela erected along the path of the expedition in this area. All right, we're going to quickly do this before we get to before the ad. So the other one that we'll talk about in the Sinai, another mining area, very close to it, is called Wadi Maghare. Actually did have an Egyptian name called Mefka, or the town of turquoise. And today it's called the Valley of the Caves. This was a major turquoise mine dating back to the Old Kingdom and then continuously used during the New Kingdom. It was rediscovered in 1809 and excavated several times. And unfortunately, as I meant to mention with Serabit al-Qadim, all of these things were attempted to be mined again, but mines are empty, which is probably why this place was abandoned, because they emptied these mines. So turquoise was attempted to be mined, and apparently it's like not anymore. No more turquoise in this area. So what's so interesting about this site is that there are remains of ancient Egyptian monuments from the 3rd dynasty. So like from super early in ancient Egyptian history. And the ones that you see here, I have, this is Khufu is on the left, and then this is Seknakt, I think that's Seknakt, is on this side. So you have monuments from the 3rd to the 19th dynasties. Most of them come from the 12th dynasty in the Middle Kingdom. But there are 2 3rd dynasty rock tablets from Pharaoh Seknakt, one of Djoser, and 2 tablets of Sekhem Ket, Sahu Re of the 5th dynasty. Oh my god, Ivan! We're about to get an ad! Oh no!
King of the South and North,
Welcome on in! We are gonna get a raid in just an ad in just like a minute. But thank you so much, Ivan, for the raid. Thank you so much. What were you talking about today? Science and technology. We can also wait until after the ad to chat. But hello, thank you. Welcome on in. And thank you so much, Tim. Tiki McPhee. Thank you so much for the follow. Welcome on in. We have Khufu on this side, Otto, and we have, actually this might be Sekhem Ket. Yes, this is Sekhem Het. Yeah, that's what the hieroglyphs say, Sekhem Het. But yeah, this is Khufu right here. Oh, AI in the society. That's not fun, but welcome on in. Yes, Djoser with the DJ, not that. Yes, they are very similar, but no, Djoser with a D, DJ. But welcome on in, everybody. I know we have an ad, but we'll chat for a split second. No AI in this house. I talked with somebody and they were like asking me how can you use AI to make your business better? And I'm like, I can't. No, I don't want to. I don't want to, please. No. Don't suggest that. Meta-ethics. What the heck is meta-ethics? It sounds scary. I feel weird sitting here and quiet because I don't want to talk. That's what he said, meta-ethics. We'll have to have Ivan describe it, what it is. Because I don't know. I don't get it. One more minute. I'm just gonna eat the whole time. So many cool things in the background. After the ethics debate is so funny. 28 seconds. So the only thing I can do is not talk. It's not corn nuts, but it's popcorn, but it also is. Okay, I'm back. Hello everyone from Ivan's stream. Welcome on in. My name is MelissainDeNile. I am in denial in more ways than one. I am an Egyptologist, archaeologist, and I stream Egyptology, archaeology, and history games here on Twitch, as well as doing lectures and discussions. So tonight, we are doing part 2 of our Cities of Ancient Egypt series, or lecture. And we went over cult centers at the beginning of this lecture, and now we're going through major cities or areas that the ancient Egyptians occupied outside of the Nile River Valley, because we focused on a lot of those in the last lecture, which is already up on my YouTube if you want to go and watch the lecture from last month. But feel free to raid and rest Ivan, but thank you guys so much for coming on over. I am trying to power through so that we're not lecturing for too late, because the last lecture was so long. But we are talking about cities and mining villages in the Sinai Peninsula, mainly mining for things like copper, turquoise, malachite. So we have been talking about Wadi Maghareh, and it was called Mefka in ancient Egypt, and it has a lot of remains of monuments from like the 3rd dynasty all the way to the 19th, so that's Old Kingdom all the way to the New Kingdom. Most of them are coming from the 12th dynasty in the Middle Kingdom, but we have things like rock tablets and rock carvings and rock art from pharaohs in the 3rd dynasty and pharaohs in the 5th dynasty, and there's just lots of different stuff in this area. It seems to have been a very important mining town to get turquoise in this area. We do also know that there was an Old Kingdom settlement on a hill nearby, and when excavated, it contained around 125 rough stone structures, more than likely where miners supposedly lived. It's unclear if they continued to live in those settlements or if they lived in a different place after the Old Kingdom. But we got Khufu over here, smiting an enemy with the god Thoth and Horus up here. And we have 2 depictions of, who did I say this was? This is Sekhem Ket, who is wearing on one version the red crown and another version the white crown. All right. Tijaru. Not to be confused with Chebu, because I got really confused when I was doing this lecture and I was like, I've already talked about this city and I was really pissed off. And no, Tijaru. This is a fort settlement. It's like on the border of what we would consider the Sinai Peninsula and actual Egypt, but it is still off of the Nile Delta, so it is not connected to the Nile in any way. This is a fort settlement that is on something called the Way of Horus. And it's really important to understand what that is when you are looking at how ancient Egypt is connected to the Middle East, to the Levant, to Mesopotamia. So it's just east of the city of Kantara, which is a city located on either side of the Suez Canal. So although it's not drawn in this picture, the Suez Canal now comes straight up through this area. And so it goes straight through the city of Kantara, and this city of Tijaru is just a little bit east of that part. So it's on technically the eastern side of the Suez Canal. It was called Chijaru, Chicharu, whichever way you want to pronounce it. And in Greek name is called Sila or Sile. This is a fortress on something called, again, the Way of Horus, or also called the Horus Military Road. It is literally called the Wa'ut Hair. So Horus Military Road is the Wa'ut Hair. Or I guess Way of Horus is Wa'ut Hair. So this is a route that goes from the Nile Delta along essentially the northern coast of the Sinai Peninsula to then connect Egypt to the Levant. And this is what I mentioned way at the beginning of the lecture when we talked about sailing, like the Egyptians taking boats to get to the Levant. I mean, they may have, but like I don't know a lot of evidence of it. And the Way of Horus is something that is super old and is continuously used. So it seems more than likely that the Egyptians were not, they did not have boats big enough to go on the Mediterranean, but they were using land travel to get over to the Levant via the Way of Horus. So this is known about from the Old Kingdom all the way through to the Saite period of the 26th dynasty in the late period. It's a major route for traders, migrants, nomads, and the military. Now this fortress of Chijaru is one of the many different stops on this route for those who are traveling, but we apparently know that this place was a place to banish criminals to, which is fascinating. Pharaoh Horemheb says in his great edict that Chijaru was a place of punishment. And it is referenced in the Amarna letters that many different mayors were apparently killed at Chijaru's city gates, which is very interesting. Potentially, I think they mean Near Eastern mayors, I think. I'm not 100% sure. But I think it's in reference to... a lot of the Amarna letters are people from the Near East begging Akhenaten to do anything military in the Near East and stop the Hittites from massacring everybody. I think it's the Hittites, but don't quote me on that. So I think that there's also a possibility of them just saying more of like a turn of phrase that like, oh my God, our mayors are being murdered at your front door. Like at Chijaru's front door or something along the lines of that. But it's referencing sort of that this is a big fortress on the way to Egypt. For them. Exactly. Not gold. I don't want gold leaf. I want ignits. But they aren't giving them to him. This fortress actually had a specific patron god called the Horus of Mesen. In this case, Horus is seen in the form of a lion, which is wild. And it's probably why you can see the name in hieroglyphs is written with the hieroglyph of a lion. And we do think that this Horus of Mesen is related to the Horus of Edfu, because Chijaru is sometimes referred to as the Edfu of Lower Egypt. So there's some sort of connection between the two of them. What remains now, might you say? Arguably almost nothing, because archaeologists, it took them a really long time to actually figure out where the site of Chijaru actually was. They thought it was a different place called the Tel Abu Sifa, but we now accept that it was actually located at the Tel Hebua, but they only discovered this in 2000. So this is very recent kind of discovery. So the site is on a ridge. It gives a very strategic position to kind of overlook the area. And they found the graves of soldiers and horses and mud brick walls and a moat. There are reliefs of Thutmose II, Seti I, and Ramses II that were discovered in 2008 as well. So, yes, there's always graves. There's always graves. Let's look at Arsinoe, which is another name that I hate pronouncing because I feel like I'm saying it wrong every single time. There's just two more towns that we're going to talk about in the Sinai, because again, it's very sparsely populated. There's not really a lot of things going on in this area. So this is located in this is the only way I'm going to be able to say it, the armpit of the Red Sea up here, the armpit of the Sinai Peninsula. it's really only safe in Sharm el Sheikh. That's the only place that people will ever let you go in Sharm el Sheikh. And the cool, like, Sharm el Sheikh is cool, but it's a resort town, so there's not really any. There is a museum there where they've moved stuff there. Otto, don't do this to me. Otto. Don't scare me like that. There's nothing going on. Or did you just hear the song? Yeah, that's in the song. That's in the song. That's in the background music. It's always been in the background music. Yes, you do, and that's what this image is, because there's no images of this city. I feel like I've said this before. It's a newscaster about the Apollo or something, about landing on the moon, and I feel like no one's ever heard it. Oh, don't tell me that. I don't need that. I don't need that in my life right now. We'll get better chill music soon-ish. But yes, this is one of the cities that is featured in the second DLC. So again, this is sort of in the armpit of the Red Sea, kind of going up to what is the Suez Canal and stuff like that. Essentially, this is the Gulf of Suez. So it's up at the very top of the Gulf of Suez. I cannot figure out if there's actually an ancient Egyptian name. It is mostly a Greek Ptolemaic city called Arsinoetes, or Cleopatris. Again, probably founded during the Greek or Roman period. It's the capital of the Hierapolite Nome and one of the principal harbors of Egypt, according to the Red Sea, but again, mainly in the Greco-Roman period. And it essentially is seated right next to something called the Eastern Canal. I think that actually might be this in the map. The Eastern Canal is also called the Royal Canal. And this connects to the Pelusiac branch of the Nile. We talked about this last time. It was started during the late period, but it was never finished during that time period, so it wasn't finished until the Greek period. And so this city, Arsinoe, was named after the wife of Ptolemy Philadelphus, or Ptolemy II. Her name was Arsinoe II. And what's really interesting is that the city was considered actual property of the queens or princesses of the Ptolemaic dynasty, which is why one of the Cleopatras renamed her, but we actually don't know which one. There's 7 of them, so we don't know. But yeah, very interestingly, is a land for the queens, a land for the ladies. I really, really could not figure out if there's anything that still stands here or if it has even been excavated. But we do know there was a really big bay of the site. It was a really big harbor and trade port. And it, unfortunately, although it was a big harbor at that time, it was not the biggest because it's actually pretty hard to get the boats. There's a lot of northern winds that come off the Mediterranean, and so to get boats at that time, obviously boats with no engines, to get up all the way up into this area was actually kind of hard. So it wasn't the best port, but it was a good enough port. And again, it's in the first DLC of Assassin's Creed Origins, which is why I put that photo there, because there's no photos of excavations or anything of this city. The last one in the Sinai Peninsula we're going to talk about is Pelusium, which I think we mentioned last time a little bit, but it's an interesting city, so I wanted to talk about it a little bit more. You can see it's technically on the very, very edge of the Nile, but it's sort of still in the Sinai. This is a very important city, again, during the Greco-Roman period. The ancient Egyptian name for the city was Sen or Sunu, and it could be for sun as well. It also was called Per Amun, meaning the house or the temple of Amun. And then in Greek, it was called Pelusian or Sion, and today it is at the site of Tel El Farama. This site is really important because it lies in between the seaboard and then the marshes of the Nile Delta. And it's essentially, besides Tijaru, which is sort of out there in more the desertish area, it is one of the easternmost cities in Egypt, and is on very close to that Way of Horus as well. And it is kind of the first city that could get attacked if somebody was trying to come in and attack Egypt. And then it's a stopover. It's a massive stopover for people coming in. While it probably is a relatively old city, most of the major events that we know happened in the city date to the late period and then into the Greco-Roman period. The Wikipedia for Pelusium has a whole list of all of these events. I'm only going to mention a few of them. There are quite a few battles and some to do with like more military conquests because it is on the edge of the Egyptian territory. And it was also on two major Roman roads, one from Memphis to Pelusium and then one from Akka to Alexandria. And one of the biggest battles is going to be the Battle of Pelusium in 525 BCE, which is the battle that transferred the throne from the Egyptian pharaohs to the king of the Persians in the first Persian period, in the late period. And then the city was also taken by the Persians in 340 BCE, which is after the Persians were then defeated the first time, but this is also around the time that they are essentially taking Egypt again. So they take down Pelusium again and eventually get power and over the last native Egyptian dynasty. In 333 BCE, the city opens its gates to Alexander the Great. This is probably the first place he arrived in Egypt. And we've sort of talked about this before, that like I used to say that that Alexander got Egypt as a consolation prize. It's not totally true. He sort of had to take Egypt a little bit, but it did seem like they kind of let him have it pretty easily. And supposedly this is also very close to where Pompey was murdered in 48 BCE. Was murdered by the Egyptians and then brought back to Alexandria to be presented to Julius Caesar. And I don't know how accurate that is. Somebody corrected me on that when I was talking about the site in one of my videos. And I was like, I don't know. That's what Wikipedia said. So I'm going to listen to it. What remains in the town together? So since it's mostly a Greco-Roman town, it seems like generally it had a much more Hellenistic plan for the city. Archaeologists have discovered Roman baths and mosaics dating to the 3rd century CE. They also found a Roman theater and a Byzantine basilica. And this is literally a site that they announced like last month. This is a water-focused temple for a god called Pelusius. So named after the Pelusiacic branch, so a very local deity, probably more Greco-Roman than anything, but this giant circle, it's giant. In 2019, they thought originally this would be some sort of Senate or headquarters building, but then the entire thing was just uncovered a couple months ago. And it appears to be a water-focused temple. They have like a cistern, and that entire circle would have been full of water, which is pretty cool. All right, 2 more sections: Red Sea and the Levant. 1041. Oh God. Okay. Something like that. I can't remember what his name is. I did an Egypt news about it. You can go on my YouTube and you can find it. Okay. Need more water. My throat is dry. Ice has now melted. Okay. Looking at the Red Sea, There are a couple different settlements that the ancient Egyptians founded on the Red Sea. Obviously, the Red Sea is really long, so we're only talking about the ones that are like in modern Egypt today. It doesn't appear that the Egyptians ever founded a city not in modern Egypt on the Red Sea. The earliest evidence of the ancient Egyptians on the Red Sea is during the Middle Kingdom, when the first written records of the expeditions to Punt were recorded. This is an image of a boat from the Hatshepsut Temple talking about her expeditions to Punt. We know the first recorded, the first expedition was organized by Pharaoh Sahu Re in the 5th dynasty during the Old Kingdom, but we don't know as much about that one. And so we know more about the ones coming from the Middle Kingdom and the very, very famous one done by Hatshepsut. Which is recorded as well. We're going to talk about a few different sites, and the first one is not technically a city, but it is a wadi. So I wanted to talk about Wadi Hammamat because you might hear about it. It's very important to talk about when you're talking about the Red Sea and how the ancient Egyptians actually got to the Red Sea, and this is one of the main ways. So this is a wadi, which is a dry, and it's typically an ancient dry river valley, if you've ever heard that word before. And you can see a picture of the modern road now. It's this dry river valley that goes all the way from the Nile River Valley to the Red Sea. It stretches specifically from the city of Koptos to the city of Kesir on the Red Sea. This did get an actual ancient Egyptian word. It is called the Ro Henu, or the mouth to the interior, which is fascinating to me. And then its Arabic name, Wadi Hammamat, means the Valley of Many Baths. This essentially is the most direct route that ancient Egyptians, even from the north and the south, could go to the Red Sea. This is one part of the Nile River that just sticks out the closest. Technically, yes, people from the Delta could kind of go over and down, but this, for the south, is definitely, this is the best way to get to the Red Sea. And you can also see where Dendera is, where Nakata is, where Luxor is, and lots of other very big populous cities, even in the pre-dynastic period as well. This is about a 200 kilometer or 124 mile long stretch. It's been used for over 3,000 years. On each of the sides of the wadi, there are also mines and quarries for the Egyptians to get things like basalt, schist, something called a beken stone, which is a different type of stone for the ancient Egyptians. It's a specific stone that we know now as green metagraywacke. So it's a stone that is like the Narmer palette is, I think, a graywacke stone. As well as quartz containing gold is also found in some of the mines around this area. This site is also described as the earliest known, described on the earliest known geological map, which you can see up here. It is called the Turin Papyrus Map, and I have to look into this more because that sounds really freaking cool. So we might have to do a discussion about this map another, I don't know. I would love to, the Turin Museum has a really amazing papyrus collection. I think it would be a really fun discussion to go and find some of the, besides the, obviously the harem conspiracy papyrus, I would love to look in through their papyrus collection. Because they also have, I think, the erotic, I think they have one of the big erotic papyri as well. So what remains in there today? Obviously, this is not a city. It's a natural formation. So it is still there today, but they have added a road down the valley because it is still, to the modern Egyptians, one of the best ways to get to the Red Sea. And it also is a huge hub for ancient Egyptian graffito. Includes carvings and inscriptions dating from the pre-dynastic age all the way to the modern era. It also includes the only painted petroglyph known from the Eastern Desert of drawings of reed boats, and it dates to 4000 BCE. So some of the earliest depictions, earliest petroglyphs of reed boats come from Wadi Hammamat. All right. So the main city that Wadi Hammamat connects to is called Qusayr today. This is kind of dead center on the Egyptian coast of the Red Sea. And in Egyptian, it is also called Cha'u, which is similar to the other city we talked about, but also Du'a'u. And the Greek, what's so interesting is that very, very little is talked about this site during the Pharaonic period. But what I'm thinking about, there is a site that is just south. So we're looking at this site kind of here in the center of this map. There is a site just south of it that we're going to talk about next that I think actually was more important to the ancient Egyptians in the Pharaonic period. And then this city was more important during the Greco-Roman period. It's kind of weird. There's like, they don't talk about the Pharaonic period at all when they talk about this site, sort of. The Greek name is Myos Hormos, or Harbor of the Mouse, or Harbor of the Mussel. It could be either one. And it was later called Aphrodite's Hormos. Today it is located in Qusayr al-Qadim, which is north of the modern city of El Qasir. And again, although this is probably occupied in the Pharaonic period, it's selected by Ptolemy II as the principal harbor for trade with India during the Ptolemaic period. And he chose this over the city up on the Sinai that we talked about with Arsinoe. He chose this city over that. Again, probably because of the northern winds and docking the boat a little bit harder in that area. And this city is fascinating, especially in the Greco-Roman period, because it is trading with India. And so it is super, super diverse. There are Tamil inscriptions that have been found dating to the 1st century CE. There are Egyptian inscriptions, Greek inscriptions, Latin, Southern Arabian, Nabatic, and Palmyrian. I believe a Buddha statue has been found at this site. Like, it is fascinating. It does appear that this site was abandoned around the 2nd to 3rd century CE, possibly because of something called the Crisis of the 3rd Century, which I've never heard of before, but it was apparently a time where the Roman Empire almost collapsed on itself. And the other option is that...
The Nile is a river in Egypt!
Hi, Ruby Mad Hatter. Welcome on in. Is that when they had, like, yeah, I was like, what is this Crisis of the 3rd Century? Like, when you see something like that has its own Wikipedia page, you're just like, what is that? And it proves how little I know about the Roman Empire. But yeah, it was like, yeah, it probably collapsed at the Crisis of the 3rd Century. And I'm like, why is this a title? It's like, kind of crazy. The other possibility is that there were more northern ports that became more accessible because Trajan built a canal to the Nile. So it may have been more accessible to do more trade in the north rather than essentially dropping all your trade here and then having to walk it over to the Nile to then put it on a boat to get it. You could go all the way back up and then get to the Nile on your boat because they built a canal. The next site is also a fascinating one. So it's very, very close to this site. This was a completely new city that I discovered in my research with this, called Oases. And it appears that this was a harbor village where many of the Egyptians sailed out to go to Punt. This is just south of Qusayr, also sort of at the end of Wadi Hammamat. Again, I think that this was the ancient Egyptian harbor, while Cha'u or Myos Hormos was the Greco-Roman harbor. They're very close, so I think this one appears to be more Egyptian, at least dating to. We believe it is called Sa'u. Not sure what it really means in Egyptian, but I think it has something to do with birds if you look at the hieroglyphs. And then the Arabic name is Mersa Gowasis, or the Scout Boat Port. There have been very, very recent investigations on this site in around the 2000s, which all sort of stem from one stela that mentions the site of Sa'u. This stela dates to the 12th dynasty. It was found in another site in the Red Sea, where there was what we call a watering station. A watering station essentially mostly made during the Greco-Roman period. It's like a stopover on a Roman road where you can water yourself and your animals. And so they investigated where the stela was found, but they didn't really find anything, and so they assumed that it had been moved to this watering site from Sa'u. And then when somebody else was investigating this site, they found another stela with an inscription of Senusret the First name and geographical name called Bia en Punt. And so then the team found a shrine for Aku in the valley of Senusret the First, which also contained the name Sa'u, which helps narrow in that this was the site called Sa'u. I know I hate the Greco-Roman period of Egypt, but it's not my fault that these cities have been occupied for thousands of years, and some of them only became important in the Greco-Roman period. Or all that remains is stuff about the Greco-Roman period. Ray, great question. Obelisks have, oh wait, are you talking about, oh, you're talking about my most recent video. I do not know who pulled those obelisks from Alexandria's Bay. Yes, I'm pretty sure Alexandria has like plenty of scuba diving and stuff like that, but no, that would have to be done by professionals because you need like a crane. Yeah, sorry, I for a second I was like, what obelisks are you talking about? I was like, oh wait, I just posted a video about obelisks in Alexandria. But yeah, I'm pretty sure those are done by, they would have to have been taken by professionals, just because you need literally a crane on a boat. Yeah, I know that there's scuba diving, I think, in Alexandria Bay, but I don't, for the most part, it's a pro thing, I would say. Yes, the Greeks and Romans were very great colonizers. They did. They lived in a lot of different places in Egypt, for sure. And they definitely, I think what's interesting is that they definitely liked the places outside of the Nile. Like, obviously there are certain parts, they do have like places in the Fayum, and they have Alexandria and stuff. But I find it interesting that they really did focus on a lot of oases, and they focused on a lot of the Sinai and the Red Sea, and I think it shows how many Greeks and Romans were coming to Egypt, and how much they wanted to trade and settle in lots of different places. Yeah, right. So I'm an archaeologist, so I have discovered things. I've never excavated in Egypt. I would love to at one point, but it's just not really on the cards for me. But I discover my own things. I have my thesis of dogs of ancient Egypt. I discover new dogs every day. Not every day, but a lot of new dogs. But no, I do excavations, not as often as I did, but I've done them a lot of times. Archaeology is my base. It's my base stuff. But yeah, Egypt would be cool one day, but it's just hard to get to unless you're doing a PhD, and I don't want to do that. So, am I done with this section? Oh no, there's one really cool thing. Okay, so, no, you're totally fine. We're doing a lecture. You can ask questions. I don't mind. I'm losing my train of thought because I've been lecturing for so long and I need to finish this lecture. But no, I think we're still making good time. Okay, so this site is fascinating. So what it appears is that this was a pharaonic site where the ancient Egyptians, as they are preparing to go to Punt, would obviously they would sail up the Nile wherever they're coming from. They would get to Coptos. They would take their boats out. They would deconstruct them in some way, and then bring them through the wadi all the way to this site. And then this is where they would reconstruct the boats to then put them in the water in the Red Sea to sail down to Punt and to other locations in the Red Sea. And we know this because of one, that amazing picture in the center, which is called the Cave of Ropes. I need to do more research of the Cave of Ropes. I just discovered this photo like 3 hours ago, and I need to do more research because I couldn't find enough about it, but it's a cave of ropes. And it's a cave of ancient pharaonic, I'm pretty sure pharaonic ropes. And we also have cedar planks that probably came from one of Queen Hatshepsut's expedition. Those were found in 2005, so this is a very recent site, obviously. This is just the 2000s. I think the Cave of Ropes, I think that dates to the 12th dynasty. I need to do more research because I literally just discovered it like fairly recently. And we also know that, no, these are just the ropes that would be used for the ship. These are just abandoned ropes, if that makes sense. At least I think, I don't think there's any sort of special meaning. I think this is just a place where they put their ropes. We also know that there are some shrines that have been discovered at the site, and the bases of the shrines are anchors. They are literally, like, anchors in this case are like big stones, essentially, with a hole in it. And so, whoops, sorry. Oh no, go back. So these anchors are being used as the bases of these shrines, and essentially it's that, hey, why do we have to bring an anchor back and forth down the wadi if it's this heavy stone when we can just leave it here? And then somebody picks up the anchor and says, I'm going to use this as not an anchor. I'm going to use this as a foundation of my shrine. And so they would just leave shit there that they didn't think was useful to bring all the way back with them, which I think is really cool. Yeah, I need to do more research. The site looks cool. It seems like there's an Italian excavation. I think they're the one who found the Cave of Ropes. All right. The last one that we're going to talk about on the Red Sea is another Greco-Roman site, because it's the only ones that are there. And this is going to be a site called Berenike. You might sense a trend with all of these places. Berenike is all the way down here at the bottom of this map. So this is a Greco-Roman port. It's a very powerful port in southern Egypt. In ancient Egyptian, it was called the Saz Kert. And in the Greek, it was Berenike Troglodicta, or Berenike, or Berenice. All of these are named after the mother of Ptolemy II, Berenike I. Troglodicta, which is a crazy word, refers to the native people of the region, the Troglotai, or cave dwellers, which I'm sure is not an accurate name for them. So this, as you can see, is on the eastern end of this Roman road. So not the Wadi Hammamat, which comes out here, but the Romans created a road that went down from Koptos all the way down to Berenike. And there was another road that came out of here that also went to Antinopolis, which you can, no, that's not Antinopolis. I don't know where Antinopolis is. I think it's down here somewhere. So this is an important city for the Romans, again, to trade with India, as well as to access local mines as you kind of go along this road. It was probably abandoned sometime in the 6th century CE, because it appears that the bay that is down in this area filled up with sediment over time. So, hey, no good harbor, not a good city. There have been a lot of different excavations dating back to the early 1800s with Belzoni. They have discovered a temple that preserves the name of the Emperor Tiberius, but it's in an Egyptian style, which is fascinating. And it's like in an Egyptian style of architecture, but it actually has Greek reliefs, which is interesting as well. And this map is from a recent excavation, so there's a late Roman necropolis, a early Roman necropolis. There's a Hellenistic fort, there's Hellenistic fortifications, there's a Roman trash dump, which is number 5. Where'd number 5 go? Here. There's a Roman port, there's the waterfront. So yeah, waterfront is number 7. So see how there used to be a bay here, and the bay is gone. Number 9 is a temple complex back here in the corner. Number 10 is a church. Number 11 is an Isis temple. There's residential district, storerooms, and then the archaeology camp is up here, which is cool. Yeah, Il Belzoni is right. So more recently, archaeologists have found a range of artifacts coming from India, surprise, one of the weirdest things, the largest single concentration of black peppercorns in the Mediterranean world has been found archaeologically here. Yeah, we could do that. It would have to be Egyptian antiquarians, which I know they do other things, but I would only focus on Egyptian ones. But yeah, the largest single concentration of black peppercorns found in the Mediterranean world, which I think is fascinating. I'm saying that to curb other people assuming we're going to talk about what's his name who blew up Troy, because I don't want to talk about what's his name who blew up Troy. They also found a 2,300-year-old fortress in 2009, and interestingly, because we were talking about elephants, was believed to have served as a hub to transport war elephants. And I can't remember why they said that, but nothing to sneeze at. And then as I mentioned, based on this map, there have been an Isis temple found along with a lot of mummified animals as well. All right, guys. Oh no, wait, this isn't the last section. This is second to last section. Okay. I was really hoping we'd finish in like a half an hour, but that's okay. That's fine. It's fine. I forgot about Nubia. Apologies. I'm hanging in there. Yeah, the war elephants thing, I think mostly dates to the Romans. Again, we talked about elephants being in Egypt, and I think that's not pharaonic age, but it also said 2,300 years old is the Roman period. Okay, wait, that makes more sense. Sometimes when I hear the word 2,300, I forget about CE. Does that sound stupid to say? If it says 2,300, I forget that we're in 2026. Like, I forget about that. Yeah, war elephants are 100% Hannibal. All right. So, looking towards Nubia, or modern... Wah! Are you here? He's here. He's here! Run away, guys! Run away. How many drunk people you have at the bar tonight? Me and Mark thinking the same thing. Or he's off and he just remembered. Those are the two options of why he's late. Hello, Real Mango Beards. Welcome on in. We're almost to the end. It's probably drinkers. A couple of old women won't go to bed. It's the final countdown. I do Ford. I don't know a lot about it. It's not my favorite. I wouldn't put it as like my second favorite and such. But I like Greece is cool. I don't think it's as cool as Mesopotamia. I want to be a hipster. I don't like the things that people. I don't like the classics. No, don't like the classics. All right. So obviously we don't have time to go through all of the actual Nubian cities that we know of. I'm only looking at Egyptian cities established in what is considered Nubia. And maybe one day we can do a discussion on Nubia. Nubia is one of those, I don't know. it's one of those subjects I'm a little cautious always to do because it's like, it is Egypt, but it's not Egypt. And so sometimes I feel a little lackluster because I feel like I don't know. It's a very controversial topic in a certain way. So, and just so everybody's on the same page, the area south of ancient Egypt, maybe I should get her to give us a lecture because that would be great. That would be so much easier than me trying to do a discussion about it. I think we've talked about this. But the area south of modern Egypt is called Nubia, but it contained multiple different civilizations, most prominently Kush. So the Kushites are Nubian, but not all Nubians are Kushites, just so everyone is clear. So we're going to talk about a few of the different sites, of the different sites that the ancient Egyptians founded past what would typically be their borders, sort of deeper into Nubia. So what we'll see here is at the very, very top of this map, you're going to see Abu Simbel, which is already significantly south of Aswan. And then we are going to look first at Buhen here. I also am actually going to show you guys a very good picture of the cataracts. And I think we're going to talk about cataracts a little bit because I feel like I've sort of now finally understood what a cataract is on the Nile. I think I've sort of been misleading you guys if I've talked about it before. But in fact, it feels like it's going to be a test at the end. I have joked, I actually have it on a post-it note here, that for my anniversary stream, I think we're going to do a quiz about all the lecture topics I gave and just pick a couple things that you guys should have learned about from the lectures, just for fun. We don't do quizzes at the actual day, but I think for the anniversary it might be fun to do a pop quiz. So the first one we're going to talk about is Buhen. This is one of the most significant Egyptian settlements in Nubia. It is located just below, because remember the Nile flows from the south to the north, just below the second cataract on the western bank of the Nile in present-day Sudan. Its Egyptian name is Buhen. Its Greek name is Bohan. The same thing. This site dates back to the Old Kingdom, possibly the 4th dynasty during the reign of Seneferu, builder of the bent and red pyramids, where it seems like it was originally probably founded for copper working. Not copper mining, but copper working, which is interesting. This site was only discovered back in the 60s when archaeologists found the ancient copper factory. And what's really weird is that there actually doesn't seem to be any copper mines anywhere nearby. There are some in Egypt and there are some in northern Sudan, but they're still kind of far from the site. So it does not appear that they were mining it anywhere close. It means that somebody was sending the copper there to get worked to be made into other objects. So fascinating. But that Old Kingdom site seems to have been abandoned around the 5th dynasty, possibly from Nubians essentially forcing them out, forcing them south, or forcing them north, excuse me. But by the Middle Kingdom, it is getting reestablished as a fortress by Senuseret III. There was a very large rock wall built, and it was a central stopover for anybody heading south. Senuseret III held 4 campaigns in Nubia during his reign, so building a fortress here makes sense. But he built 7 fortresses in Nubia. I only have time to talk about 2 of them, but they are called Mirgissa, Shalfak, Uronarti, Askut, Dabanarti, Semna, and Kuma. Those are the 7 forts that he built during the Middle Kingdom in Nubia, which I had no idea that he built those. That was news to me. Senuseret III is becoming a cooler pharaoh than I knew. So we know that from 2 stela dating to the Second Intermediate period that the site was actually annexed from Nubia, and that the Egyptians who gained control over Buhen were essentially dependent on the Nubian kings to achieve this annexation. And during this period, that fortress was sacked. Archaeologists in the 50s discovered a skeleton of a horse that died in battle between two layers, two bastions of the main wall. And what's super interesting, it's probably the earliest known horse remains in Egypt, even though it's not in Egypt, it's technically in Sudan, but in an Egyptian sense, because these horses were introduced in the Second Intermediate period, but technically oh, they're introduced in the north, but some of the oldest skeletal remains of a horse were discovered, and it, based on the shape of the horse's skeleton, it appears to be a Near Eastern horse. It does not appear to actually, there's actually something called there's a type of zebra that kind of looks like a horse if you're just looking at the skeleton. It's not a skeleton of a zebra, it's a skeleton of a horse. So what remains now of Buhen? When it was excavated in the 60s, there was a really decent amount of the fortress. It's about 140,000 square feet, or around 13,000 square meters. Had a small town laid out in a grid system within the walls. Had drawbridges, bastions, buttresses, ramparts, battlements, arrow slits, and a catapult, apparently. I don't know how we know they had a catapult, but apparently they had a catapult. At its peak, there were probably around 3,500 people living here. And there was a central administrative hub in the northern end of the settlement, which had 2 different floors, which was really, really cool. Unfortunately, Buhen is now underwater. Is underwater because of the Aswan High Dam and the formation of Lake Nasser. So it was documented as much as it could be in the 60s, but it is now underwater. And unfortunately, guys, you will sense a trend as we talk about this. Potentially, that they were getting shipped all the way to Buhen, or at least they were there at that time. I'm gonna say right now, the rest of the lecture is gonna be a little bit heartbreaking for a variety of reasons. So be prepared. The next site is Mirgissa, also known as Iken. And this is one of the other forts. I wasn't actually going to talk about this one at first, but then I realized it is sort of bigger than Buhen, so I had to talk about it. And this is situated at the Second Cataract, just south of Buhen. I know I covered half of this image with it, but this is what a cataract is. The cataracts of the Nile have always been described to me as an area where the Nile got really narrow and constricted, and so that boats couldn't get through. What I'm actually now discovering is that cataracts are these areas that have lots of little islands, and so it's not as deep in certain areas, and there are rapids, which I did not think about. So that is actually what a lot of the cataracts on the Nile look like. And if you remember back to when we were talking about Philae and Elephantine, the Aswan and Philae and Elephantine, those are situated at the first cataract. So they are on these islands, just like this area is as well. That blew my mind a little bit when they were saying, oh, there are rapids, that's why it's hard for the boats to go through. And I was like, oh my gosh, I understand this now. There are rapids, there's waterfalls, there's elevation that make it difficult for boats to go through. So this would have to be an area that you have to go around. More people are going to recognize the name Buhen. I think it is a more recognizable city that is talked about, or fort that is talked about, but this is actually much larger and is the largest of the forts built in Nubia in the Middle Kingdom. Again, called Iken in Egyptian and Mirgissa in Arabic. If essentially you are coming from the north, you would have to leave your boat and go around the cataract to get to this fort. But if you're coming from the south, you would be able to come right up to it. It is this part over here. You can see one of the other forts that I talked about, the Dober Narti, is on one of these islands over here, but Mirgissa is over here. And so we can assume that there was some sort of earlier town that existed in the spot. It's at a river control point. It just makes the most sense. But it was majorly occupied in the Middle Kingdom and then in the Second Intermediate period, and not so much in the New Kingdom. And we can attribute it again to Senusret III, and it was sort of like a customs point. It was this choke point of the river where everybody had to go through this site to get to it, to get to the north. This city is so much more massive. So this is 810,000 square feet or 75,000 square meters. It had a large walled section, but there was also residences outside the wall. The fortress was on the western wadi, with the rocky islet called Dobenardi that formed this sort of barrier from the south. That fortress was 4,300 square feet or 40,000 square meters. It had double walls with bastions and squared corner towers. It had a moat, lots of different things. And there are multiple cemeteries dating to the Middle Kingdom all the way to the 18th dynasty that have been found in multiple locations around this fort. And the goddess Hathor had her own temple on the site, as she is referred to as the Mistress of Iken. And what you see here, this dotted line, is a boat slipway that goes from the harbor all the way to a part of the Nile. This is where they would have dragged the boats to get around this area. And unfortunately, this area also flooded. It was excavated, I think, also in the 60s and the 70s, but it is also flooded. I'm pretty sure. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know why. I didn't write what happened, but I'm pretty sure it's also flooded. Sorry. All right, we're gonna get an ad. Can I do Amara West and another ad? No, I think I will skip to the next part. Any questions? Also, I forgot to mention you guys can use the lecture question thing, but nope, I forgot to mention it this entire time. That's okay. That's okay. That might site that. Let me check. That site might be actually still up. Nope. It lies under the water. Of course it does. Of course it does. Nope. We were. No, all the sites that we're going to talk about now. A lot of the Greco-Roman sites are all in the Oases or on the Red Sea. We're back to the Pharaonic period now. So this was all Middle Kingdom and New Kingdom, and a lot of the Levant site we're going to talk about is New Kingdom, sort of, as well. No, they did not. Not really. Not really as much. They went south via the Red Sea, but on the Nile, not so much. Yeah, they went down the Red Sea. The Romans did, at least. Ah! Oh my god. I think it's because I'm self-conscious, because when I eat popcorn, what I realize I do is I don't put it in my mouth. I just put my tongue out to it, and it sticks to my tongue, and I bring it in. And I think I'm self-conscious about that. So that's the next part. They did not establish a lot of cities there. We're only gonna really talk about one, but during very, very small periods of time. it's why I don't really ever call Egypt an empire, because it really never had a lot of like colonies and like other things. But I don't think they got all the way up to Turkey. I don't think. Maybe a tiny bit for a tiny time. But that's the last section of this. After I talk about the Nubian sites. But unfortunately, there's really only one city I can talk about. But I give some background. I'm gonna go get more water. I'll be right back. My God, the music changed. I don't know, Otto. Yes, very true, friend at arms. So we're gonna talk about one site, but yes, most of the time Egyptians just conquered towns in the Levant. So I don't really talk about that. I'm really talking about like Egyptian cities established outside of the Here we go. Sorry. Stupid popcorn kernels. Yes, there's a new song because the other song ran out on YouTube. Okay, so we could have talked about more forts, but I also wanted to talk about some cities that were established by the Egyptians in Nubia that weren't necessarily forts. So this is a site located near the third cataract of Egypt. So we're going more and more south, near the modern town of Abri. The Egyptian name was Per Men Ma'at Re, or the House of Seti I. Then it was called Per Ramasu Mer Amun, the House of Ramses II. And then it was called Kenem Waset. Today it is called Amara. It is unclear if this is an ancient Egyptian name or a modern Arabic name. It is not Amarna, remember, it is Amara with no N. And there is both a Amara East and an Amara West, which correspond to what side of the river they are on, and they are technically different. So technically the one that is more Egyptian, that was founded by Egyptians, is the west side of the Nile. It was founded by the 19th dynasty by Seti I, probably as an administrative center. And this was probably the official residence of the representative of Kush for the Egyptians. So like sort of the place where the Kushite ambassador would live. And then later there was a temple to Ramses II that was built there. And the tombs in this area during this time period are very similar to Egyptian style tombs. And so it indicates that Egyptians seem to actually be living there, or there is a mixture of Egyptian and Nubian ideals sort of coming in there. Thank you for the channel points for your lecture questions. The other side of the river, Amara East, was actually more significant during what is called the Meroitic period in Nubian history. This is a time period in Nubian history where the city of Meroe was the most important city, and the city of Meroe is where all of those pyramid tombs are built. At the time, the site was called Pedeme, and there was a temple there that was built for the king of Kush, Natakamani. And the remains of Amara East are still ongoing since 2008 under the British Museum. And then Amara West is documented in the early 1800s, but only a portion of the city walls exist today. All right. Let's talk about the Levant, guys. This is our last section for this lecture. My favorite Egyptian site I visited is very hard to say. Surprisingly Dendera, because I don't really like Greco-Roman sites, but it's also a hot tie between Dendera and the tombs of the nobles, because those are ones that I like a lot and I know a lot about. So the last area we're going to talk about where ancient Egyptians actually established cities is going to be in the Levant, otherwise known as the Middle East, technically the portions that are just the closest to the Mediterranean. For the most part, Egyptians heavily traded and also battled the peoples of Mesopotamia and the Levant throughout ancient Egyptian history. But when it really comes to Egyptians settling new cities or taking over cities, this really begins at the end of the Middle Kingdom and then into the New Kingdom. Archaeologists propose that there were 3 areas of Egyptian expansion in the late 4th millennium BCE. Tel Es-Sakan and a smaller site at En Besor were permanent ancient Egyptian settlements, which we'll talk about. Then there were areas of Egyptian influence along the coast like Tel Arani and Ascalon. And then there were cities that had trading contacts with Egypt like Tel Abu al-Karaz and Tel Megiddo. And those are sort of these 3 areas, is that like they did establish sites, they had a lot of Egyptian influence, and then they just had contacts with them. So it's kind of that range of power. Between 1550 and 1170 BCE, much of the Levant was contested between the Egyptians and the Hittites. And you can see where Kadesh is, where Carchemish is. I can't remember where Hattusa is. I think Hattusa is somewhere. Or I guess the Hittite Empire is Turkey. So I think Hattusa is somewhere over here as well, which was a capital of the Hittite Empire for a while. This essentially begins at the beginning of the New Kingdom, after Ahmose I pushes the Hyksos people out of the Delta, or at least pushes their power out of the Delta. The Hyksos people may have kind of hung out there and stayed there. And around this time, Egypt held a pretty decent amount of land in the area of modern Palestine and sort of the Gaza Strip in that area. But then there's all these groups that start to cut off Egypt's routes to the north. And that is when Ramses II and his son start to continue campaigns to go more and more north, which are a little bit unsuccessful, as we know. Eventually, Egypt controls over the southern Levant, pretty much collapses. And this mostly collapses with the late Bronze Age, where everything is collapsing. Everything is collapsing all around you. And they never really held any control of this area until the Ptolemaic period into the Roman period. What was the other thing I was going to say? I was going to say... I can't remember. That's okay. Let's talk about Tel Es-Sakan, because I was fascinated by the site. This fascinated me, honestly, because I had never heard of this site before. So, this is kind of really the one city. It's the only city that we're going to talk about tonight because it's the only one that really has a lot of information about it. But it is seemingly the only ancient Egyptian established city in the Levant. It's called Tel Es-Sakan. It is about 3 miles south of Gaza City in Palestine, in the Gaza Strip. So technically, if you look at like the Wikipedia for Gaza City, Gaza City will say that it is like one of the longest continuously inhabited cities in the world. Tel Assakhan is kind of part of that, and that it's not essentially that the Egyptians founded the city of Gaza City, but it's like, it's close enough that it's like, yeah, it is kind of Gaza City in a way. This site, unfortunately, we don't know the ancient Egyptian name for this site. One archaeologist suggests that this is a settlement called Wenet, which apparently is an ancient Egyptian fortified settlement outside of Egypt that is recorded on Egyptian documents or Egyptian monuments in dating all the way back to the first dynasty. But it doesn't say where it is. It just says that it's a fortified city outside of Egypt. I don't think that's what this is. I don't know. It does have a pretty early date, but it is kind of, I don't know. It's kind of back and forth. So, Tel Assakhan means the hill of ash. Actually, I don't know if it's in Arabic or Hebrew. It might be in Hebrew. I'm not sure. But it means the hill of ash because when they were excavating it, they found a lot of ash. Also, so here's ancient Gaza. So Tel Assakhan is here. Tel Assakhan is also very close to a very famous site called Tel al-Ajul, which Flinders Petrie excavated for a while. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on right here. Okay, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. So Petrie did excavate everywhere. He got really focused on Palestine and Jerusalem after Egypt. I think he did like 1 or 2 excavations in Jerusalem before, but the big thing is essentially after Tutankhamun's discovery, he found it very hard to excavate in Egypt, mostly because Egyptians were starting to restrict objects leaving Egypt. And I mean, I hate to say it, it's kind of understandable. He ran his own museum at the time, which was kind of reliant on him doing excavations. And so it's not strictly when they started cracking down, but it is timely when Petrie leaves. So he never excavates in Egypt again, really, kind of after that time. And so he and his wife actually moved to Jerusalem. They live in Jerusalem full time. Yes. I think it's in the same location as it was, but I'm not 100% sure. But it was called the Petrie Museum. It was still run by University College London, but it was his. He ran it, and so he was the one supplying artifacts. And so he sort of was like, well, my museum needs to run, and he still wanted to do research. And so he and his wife actually moved to Jerusalem, lived there. I'm pretty sure he dies in Jerusalem, actually. Hilda Petrie goes back to England afterwards, but I think he dies in Jerusalem. And so he excavates a decent amount of sites. I'm pretty sure Tel El-Jul, he may have done Tel Ashkelon too. There's a couple he did in Palestine. But yeah, very, very weird side quest. But yeah, he's one of those, that era Egyptologists who went back and forth between the Bible Belt. And we should. I did a lot of research when I did my podcast episode about him. We could do a discussion about him for sure. Yeah, we don't even need to do a lecture. We can do a discussion, because I know so much about it already. Off the top of my head, to be honest. Especially after I did that podcast episode on him. So, what is very interesting is the excavations of this site date this site to around 3,300 to 3,000 BCE. So this site is like really old. It doesn't just date that, it is occupied by Egyptians and probably other Levantine people from 3,300 to 3,000 BC. Sorry, I read that wrong. But it's occupied for about 300 years, like pre-pyramids, which is crazy. This is the late pre-dynastic age. this is around the time of Pharaoh Narmer and the first pharaoh to unify Egypt together. So it's wild and fascinating, and there needs to be way more studies about this site because it's wild. So yes, and that's the fascinating part about this that like kind of blew my mind, because I expected any city that the ancient Egyptians that they built and established in the Near East, I expected it to be New Kingdom. So that's why this blew my mind away. And I feel like it's a great way to sort of end this, because it just kind of, I don't know, it just is kind of crazy. So it began as an unfortified settlement with an enclosure wall being added later. Many parts of the city are built in an Egyptian style. Egyptian hearths, brick silos in the house to hold like grain. 90 to 95% of the pottery found in the original first city was Egyptian. But the other interesting thing is then on the other side of the spectrum, 3/4 of the portable material culture, so that's any sort of objects that you would find that's not pottery, is made locally, but with an Egyptian style. So it's like making an amulet of an Isis knot, but with a stone that's only local to the Levant, which is fascinating as well. We also have found pottery sherds of wine jars with the serek, which is an early version of a cartouche, with that of Pharaoh Narmer at the site, which is insane. Like, genuinely insane. I would have never been able to tell you that in the pre-dynastic period Egyptians were this far north. Like, I was flabbergasted when I saw that. I was like, I'm sorry, what? Pharaoh Narmer, who just united Egypt, has already sent, I mean, we don't know necessarily if he sent people to establish this city, or if these are just, like, we don't know, but like had some sort of contact with people here is crazy. Very good question, Sultan. Do you mind if I finish this? Because we're very close to finishing that, and that is a very great question that I want to give more credence to, but I want to keep talking about this because this is the last city that we're talking about. Okay. So again, it seems like the site was abandoned at least by the Egyptian settlers around 3000 BCE. And then it was not occupied again until around 2600 BCE by the local people, by Canaanites, essentially. So what remains still at this site? It is honestly kind of remarkable. This site was not discovered until 1998. So these are all super, super, super recent. It was discovered when Palestinians wanted to construct a housing complex on the south side of the Tell. Remember, a Tell is like a hill, essentially, but it's usually a hill that people built on top of, which you can sort of see in this picture because you can see that we are looking at multiple layers of houses, this excavation, which is also fascinating. So it was only discovered in 1998. This was the first site discovered in Gaza that dates to the early Bronze Age 1 and then the early Bronze Age 2 to 3. So it's crazy old in comparison to some other sites. Obviously this means because it's only discovered in the 90s that there's really not anything that it went undetected until the 90s. So there's not anything that still survives that is so viewable to people. So the excavation was conducted by the French archaeologist Pierre de MelissainDeNile, which is not a French name, but it's okay. And then the Palestinian-Canadian archaeologist Moen Sadek. Unfortunately, and this made me very, very sad, excavations were halted in the early 2000s because of countless problems with Israeli occupation of Palestine, which you guys might have assumed. No, not flooding. It's honestly worse than flooding. So there have been encroaching building projects that have threatened the site. There has obviously been lots of wars and lots of bombings. And in 2017, the government land authority of Palestine, which I'm sure is still technically run by the Israelis, bulldozed about 3 acres of the site at the very least. And it seems that they were able to stop it for a little bit. But it does seem that they have continued since 2017. I do believe this is technically the reason it's technically, I believe, the Israeli Land Authority is that they were bulldozing the site to make room for land given to Israeli soldiers. And the other part, the other thing, the encroaching building projects I forgot to mention is because of the University of Palestine, which was also like, okay, come on, people. But yeah, and then of course it has been heavily, severely damaged because of the very recent war. And nobody, I think, it seemed like in 2022 somebody was able to go in and do a survey of the site, but I can't find any evidence that anything has happened anytime recently, which makes sense. It's not a priority. It shouldn't be a priority at that time, but yeah, fuck wars. So yeah, also this little frog statue, isn't he cute? I want to do more research. I want to read some more of the studies that have come out, because obviously these are very recent. These are not like looking at old Flinders Petrie books about excavations in Palestine. This is very, very recent. This seems to be essentially a massive discovery that is unfortunately on pause for more excavations. Yeah. All right, I'll do my conclusion, then I'll go back and answer you guys' questions. So, that is it. Obviously, there are way more cities in ancient Egypt. I've covered all of the major ones over the course of the 2 lectures, I believe. There's probably some I miss, I'm sure. I apologize for not being able to get to the necropoli of Egypt, but I told you, this already was getting long. My last script was 32 pages. This is 30. It's just slightly shorter. I was never going to be able to fit the necropoli of Egypt inside of this. Again, I will let you guys vote in the Discord if you guys want me to do that as a lecture this year or next year. So I'll let you guys vote. I'll do that sometime soon.